Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is first part of What If Deku Became the Hero Society's Perfect Weapon? All credits for this video go to the original author, Moth303, so please support the real author by checking out the link in the description for more details. If you want more videos like this, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into the fanfic. Yuki Arakawa swept through the hallways of UA High with the poise of someone very much used to the campus. It was the start of a new school year. Even third years like her were excited at the thought of learning here, whether they were of the hero course or not. But she had other problems weighing her mind. She sighed and ignored the sun blaring in through the large window pane as she walked forward. Her long curly hair cascaded down her back in dark waves, catching the light with a soft sheen, while her bright purple eyes pierced through the bustling crowd of students around her. Her boots clicked on the well-polished floor, brushing past students as well as the occasional flirtatious glances from the boys around her. As Yuki turned the corner, she spotted a soft tussle of green curls, unmistakable. His freckled face was flushed from a conversation he was having while walking and talking with some friends, and he had a notebook in his hands clutched tightly to his chest. Yuki's voice sliced through the ambient noise of the crowd. Midoriya. The boy now in front of her jumped, startled by her soft-sounding voice. Midoriya quickly jumped straight and turned around only to gain a familiar look in his eye before he gave a slight bow and fumbled out. Arakawa-senpai. He blurted it out in a high enough pitch that she took a slight step back. I almost forgot you attend UA. Nice to see you again. I need you to go and get Bakugo. I need to tell you something. His right eyebrow raised and he seemed a little worried. He didn't ask any questions though, which was good for her. A short minute later Midoriya came to her spot in the cafeteria, seemingly dragging Bakugo along by his arm. Bakugo had a mean scowl on his face and looked like he was going to get sick on the shorter and more timid child just for touching him. Wow, it really is a surprise to see you two here. Yuki started disregarding any pleasantries. Bakugo scoffed loud enough for her to hear. And then Yuki spoke again. I've heard that you somehow got a quirk, Midoriya. She gave a pointed look toward the boy shaking in his skin. I mean, yeah, it just awakened really late. He stuttered as he eventually let go of Bakugo and started shifting around in place. And you, Bakugo, I thought your crappy attitude alone would get you excluded. Bakugo gained a wicked look on his face before pointing at her and yelling with venom in his voice. The hell did you drag me away from my lunch for Arakawa? As loud as ever. Yuki then gained a softer look on her face as she recollected on her thoughts on what she wanted to say to them. She wished it could have just stopped at the acknowledgement of them making it into UA. The proper congratulations maybe, but no. You remember my brother, right? Kobe. They both nodded. Bakugo sneered. Well, he's missing. Bakugo's jaw tightened and Midoriya's eyes widened at the revelation. He's stubborn. He just walked out a few weeks ago and still hasn't returned. Selfish, and too arrogant for his own good. She said that last part with a more silent tone, but it was still heard by the two boys. Midoriya, bless him, seemed more broken up by it, more than Yuki thinks he ever should. Arakawa-senpai, do you think he's okay? Did he say anything before he left? Yuki shrugged, her expression unreadable. He hasn't said much of anything since he got back from the behavioral program a couple years ago. We've alerted police. My ma just said that you guys should know since you've had a past with him. Her gaze lingered on them. In all the years she has known Bakugo, she had never heard him be so quiet. It was almost alarming. A mixture of grief and annoyance clouded her mind when she looked over to Midoriya, though, not because of him, it was because of Kobe, her spoiled little brother. She felt bad whenever she thought of the interactions that went on between her brother and Midoriya. He was rude, obnoxious, and just a downright bully. Kind of like Bakugo, but there just seemed to be a cold wickedness whenever she thought of how Kobe acted. I hope you find him. She wishes she could see that kindness in him that is so clearly evident in the boy in front of her. So do I. The rain had stopped, leaving the world smelling clean but fragile. I sat up in the bed, the sheets crumpled around me, my gaze falling to the window. Outside, the streets glistened, reflecting a sun that was just beginning to rise. A new day. Before I could gather my thoughts, the door creaked open, and small, quick footsteps pattered towards me. "Mister, breakfast is ready." I looked over to see the kid from last night, grinning at me like I was worth grinning at. He'd lost his way home in the storm last night, wandering out too far. I certainly wasn't planning to stay at an orphanage, but when I brought him and the head matron figured out that I had nowhere to stay, she insisted that I get some rest. What a kind lady. "Morning," I muttered, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The kid climbed onto the bed, uninvited, and plopped himself down, legs swinging. "You gonna eat with us? Siko-san makes the best eggs." Siko. That was the matron's name, kind eyes, tired face, probably in her late 40s. She'd thanked me too many times last night, like she couldn't believe someone other than a hero would help her for nothing in return. I guess I seemed suspicious in a way. "Sorry kid, I don't think I'll be staying long enough for breakfast," I said, swinging my legs over to the side of the bed. The kid tilted his head, his smile faltering. "Why not? You don't have anywhere else to go, do you?" I chuckled. It was a low and bitter one. "Plenty of places, just none where I want to be." That seemed to confuse him, but his face lit up again as if he'd found the perfect distraction. "I'm gonna be a hero someday, you know." A hero, the word hit me like cold water. My mind flickered to a now distant past. Back to training, unwanted training, friends, Izuka Midoriya, and the way his eyes would shine when he spoke about being a hero. Even Bakugo and his relentless drive, something I never had. Then I thought of myself, years ago, knocking him down for dreaming too big. Why was I like that? It makes little sense to me, and even thinking about it now just flares up some unwanted anger, rage. I looked back at the kid staring up at me. "That's so," I said, forcing a smirk. "Yeah, like All Might. He's the strongest and he saves everyone." The kid's voice was so full of certainty that it made my chest tighten. I didn't reply. What was there to say? That All Might wasn't invincible? That even heroes could fall apart? I wasn't about to crush a kid's dream, but I didn't know whether I should encourage it either, so all that I did was smile. The kid hopped off the bed, looking up at me expectantly. "You'd make a cool hero too, your quirk's awesome." For a moment my mind froze. I didn't remember showing the kid my quirk. Until I did. It was the night before. Once I had found a dry enough place, I showed him something to stop him from shaking in fear. He was scared that he wasn't home. Scared that he got lost, so I just did what I thought would work in that situation. "You've got a wild imagination." Before he could say more, I stood and grabbed my jumper and headed out to the hallway. Siko was waiting by the door, her arms crossed. "Leaving already?" she asked. Her tone was firm and gentle. "Yeah," I replied, avoiding her eyes. "Thanks for letting me stay the night. You could stay longer if you would like. Ken seems to really like you." I looked back to the dark-haired boy and realized in slight frustration that I had forgotten to even ask his name. Forgetting the basics is pathetic. Nothing to do about it now, though. "I don't think looking up to me is a good idea, Mom. But thanks again." She stood silent while looking me up and down. It felt awkward. I didn't like it, but she hadn't done anything inappropriate or unnecessary to me thus far, so I didn't think there was anything to worry about much. She opened her mouth to speak. "Wherever you find yourself, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." She let me go past and out the door into the crisp morning sun. Whatever I'm looking for, I don't even know what it is I'm looking for. Kobe patted down his pockets and seemed mildly disappointed. "Right now, I'm broke. So money is what I should be looking for. Money comes and goes. I need it for immediate expenses like food, getting my hair done, and of course a place to stay. You could just go home." The thought slithers into my mind like a cold draft, uninvited and unwelcome. I didn't like the thought. My lips twisted into a bitter smirk. Sure, I could go home, but after so many years away from there and with very little contact with my family, it didn't even feel like a home anymore. My mother, she just brushed over the fact that she sent me away to what she believes was a behavioral facility to make me normal. If only she knew. I don't know if I even blame her, I say in a low voice to no one. Really and truly, her giving me up felt like an easy decision in my eyes. I was the definition of a brat. I spoke back, I disobeyed orders, I fought, I stole, I fought, just about everything I shouldn't have been doing I done. She probably got sick of me. When I got back it was easy to see the fake smile she put on whenever she spun around to greet me. I felt like a burden. So I left. It only took a couple years but I made the decision and left again, for the last time hopefully. And don't even get me started on my sister. I still don't know how to feel about her. There's just a cold numbness whenever she is brought to my mind. At least my mother pretended to care. With Yuki, there's nothing. Just that sharp way she looks at me as if I was something she needed to clean up. A mistake that should have disappeared without father. No, going back home isn't an option. Not now. I'm standing in front of an old warehouse, its facade faded and grimy, the kind no one looks twice at. This was the place I was looking for. A piece of paper was rumpled up in my hand containing the same name as what was being advertised in front of me. I push the door open, and the noise hits me like a wave, cheers, jeers, and the unmistakable sound of fists meeting flesh. The air inside is mixed with sweat and desperation, tinged with the faint metallic tang of blood. This is what I was looking for. An underground fighting arena. The room is dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a few industrial lights hanging above the makeshift ring in the center. The crowd presses close, a chaotic mix of spectators, some rowdy and drunk and others watching with a cold calculating interest, some with a more confident gaze. I slip around to the edge of the crowd, taking in the scene. Two fighters in the ring, their quirks looked simple at first glance, well one of them anyway. The man with a tar-like substance coating his fists. The other one I guess could have been a speedster since he would rush off to attack in quick bursts before stopping and gaining a normal speed. First time here? The voice startles me. I turn to see a woman, her sharp blur eyes appraising me. She's older, maybe mid-30s, dressed in a sharp suit that stands out in the dingy room. Something like that. I reply. She smirks, looking to fight or just watch. I hesitate, thither. I'm looking for someone who can get me work. Work, huh? Her gaze lingered on me as she pushed a long strand of her dark, oak-brown colored hair out of her face. What's your quirk? Not looking to advertise. I say, keeping my voice low as the crowd quieted down in anticipation of the ongoing fight. Her smirk widens. Smart. Stick around, she gestures to the ring. People talk after the fights. You might find what you're looking for. And so I waited. The air inside the warehouse felt thicker now, a mix of body heat, spilled drinks, and smoke clinging to dim light. The crowd's shouts blur into a dull hum. My gaze lingered on some more people in ill-fitting suits exchanging whispers like secrets. I had my ways of hearing them with my quirk. Once it was attached, I listened to the conversation ongoing. I heard words and names that sparked some interest and familiarity within me. Trigger. Did you hear of the new strain coming in? Yeah, from the Hisaiki. High risk, high reward. You've seen what it does to people it doesn't mix with, right? People start losing control and popping off like balloons. Government's starting to clamp down, but for now there's still money to be made. Doesn't matter who you know, just how much you're willing to pay. My stomach churns not from fear, but from the flickering curiosity that rises in me. I've heard of Trigger before. Often connected with the underground. An illegal drag that enhances people's quirks, pushes them beyond normal limits. Dangerous. People are speaking of it like it's a secret weapon, but what is the cost of a secret weapon in this world? Another man's voice joins the party, his tone bitter. You think Trigger's the answer? Nah, the real play is the Hisaiki connection. People don't even know they're mixing it with something darker. Something older. Older. The voice of a woman now cuts in deep to question the former. Yeah, the man chuckles. You don't think they just found this stuff by accident, do you? The Hisaiki's been around for decades, but this new Trigger, it's a goddamn power-up. And I'm guessing they've found something. Maybe some old research facility. As I heard the tail end of the conversation and the whispers of a research facility, my mind breaks away to thoughts of Eden. Hidden, dangerous, and fueled by power at any cost. Trigger. Shy Hisaiki, Eden. The pieces didn't fit neatly together, but they're too close for my comfort. I feel a presence close up on me. I turn around to see the same woman as before. She's watching with the same calculating gaze, the one that sees too much. Looks like you've found something that interests you. She says, her voice is smooth. You know, there's more to the Heiseki than just trigger. If you're smart, you'll find the right people to deal with. I swallowed hard. What's the play? I ask, my voice quieter, matching hers. She smirks. I'll give you a lead, but you'll have to make sure you're ready for what comes next. She hands me a piece of paper, the ink smudged just enough to make it look like it's been passed around too many times. I glanced down briefly at the address before pocketing it. It looked clean, too direct. Something's off. But it was my only lead, so without another word, I slipped the paper into my pocket and nodded. Thanks. Eden. The shy Heiseki. Trigger. It was all a dangerous game. No. This world was a dangerous game. And I'm playing it whether I like it or not. My quirk was a powerful one, a unique one. It was called Paper Answer. I can create paper and telekinetically mold it into whatever shape I can think of. Whatever I form takes on the function of what it resembles. A bird will fly, a knife will cut, and a shield. Well, it'll block most things. On the surface it sounds simple. Maybe in the hands of someone else it could be almost harmless and left as a party trick. But when you're forced to push it, to train until your mind blurs and your hands bleed, it can become something else. Something they called potential. The Eden Project taught me that. Or at least that's what they said they were teaching. But their version of teaching wasn't what the world would call a heroic effort or even plain diligent in any way. It was control, brutality, and perfection. I was just a kid when I was dragged to that place. A loud, angry brat who didn't think twice about anyone but himself. When I could finally walk out of that place, though, I wasn't loud anymore. The Eden Project wasn't a place to be taught, it was a place to be conditioned. I'm sure that no one truly felt like a student there, just subjects. Subjects that they wanted to replace All Might. Some days we were pit against one another. You'd learn quickly that trust was nothing but a liability. Lose and you were punished. Win and you were rewarded with cold approval and a temporary reprieve. The fights were never fair. But the worst part was the silence. We were isolated, kept from forming bonds. Conversation was discouraged. The worst part of that was the fact that I got so comfortable in that silence. The anger was lost and replaced by numbness. That may have been instinct. The easiest way to press on was to be uncaring to everything, even oneself. But that was the goal of the project. To turn potential into perfection. To forge unbreakable weapons. But perfection comes at a price. You can only forge something so much before it cracks. I don't know how I avoided breaking completely. Whatever reason for them deciding to get me into their program, it didn't matter. By the time I was home, I wasn't angry, wasn't scared with her. Just numb. The Eden Project wasn't just a painful memory, it was a scar. Some days it burned more than others, like tonight as I walked through the dim streets of Kyushu. I got some spare change for doing some small favors while still around Mizudafu, so it should last some time. The city at night felt suffocating. Neon signs buzzed overhead, casting fractured reflections on rain-slicked asphalt. The air was heavy with the lingering scent of rain, oil, and a waft of the ocean. A mixture of life and decay hung in the atmosphere. This wasn't the Kyushu people wrote about in travel brochures. No picturesque temples or serene gardens here, just cracked sidewalks and alleyways choked with secrets. The city had an unsteady pulse and I could feel it under my feet. A man leaned against a wall, puffing a cigarette, his eyes scanning the street like a predator spotting the best spots his prey could appear from. Across from him, a group of young men argued in low, clipped tones, their voices too sharp and deliberate to be friendly. I caught snatches of their conversation, product, shipments, names I didn't recognize but filed away for later. I walked past them keeping my pace steady, not too fast, not too slow. Eyes forward but not stiff. The trick was simply to look like you belonged without inviting attention. It was an instinct that I'd honed over the years. The smell of dried food wafted from a nearby stall, a stark contrast to the stench of mildew that clung to the narrower alleys. The vendor was an old man with weathered hands, chatting with a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her laugh was brittle, and it cut off the moment a man with a scarred face walked by, his presence silencing everything in his path. He glanced at me, a fleeting moment that felt like a warning, before disappearing into the night. I turned and headed down an alley that was dimly lit by a single flickering light bulb. My shoes splashed in puddles, the sound bouncing off the walls in the otherwise dreary quiet. The farther I went, the more the city seemed to fold in on itself. A flicker of neon caught my eye, and I spotted a doorway just ahead. The muffled bass of music pulsed from behind it. A club, but not one listed on any of the maps. Places like these were where I could find secrets unknown to the public. Two men loitered near the entrance, their postures casual but their eyes sharp. They didn't spare me more than a glance as I approached. The bar was dimly lit, with a haze of cigarette smoke clinging to the air like a second ceiling. And then conversation mixed with the clinking of glass. This wasn't a place for drunken revelry. Poker games occupied the center tables, with stacks of cash and chips casually strewn between players who looked far too calm for the amounts being wagered. I leaned against the counter at the far end, sipping water. Even if I could, there was no point in dulling my senses here. My eyes scanned the room, catching fragments of conversations. It didn't take long before I locked onto a target, a young man with slicked back hair and a too-perfect leather jacket. His posture screamed overconfidence, his laughter too loud to be natural. He had an air of someone who thought he owned the world. He was flanked by two others, but their presence was window dressing. This guy was their ringleader. More importantly, I'd heard him speaking about distribution areas for Trigger. I pushed off the counter and moved toward their table, keeping my steps casual. "Mind if I join?" I asked, my voice low but firm enough to catch their attention. I know it looked crazy for someone who looked like a kid to walk up to people like this. I was already on the shorter side of life. But I had walked in the bar with no problems, so this should be fine. The guy looked up, an eyebrow raised. "And who are you?" I ignored the question and gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Just someone interested in your line of work." That got his attention. His grin widened, and he leaned back, spreading his arms as if to say, "I've got nothing to hide." "Work, huh? You in the market or just curious?" "Call it research," I said, sliding into the chair. I kept my expression neutral, letting the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. "Heard you distribute Trigger." "Right." At that his grin faltered. His companions shifted uncomfortably. They were unexperienced. But he kept his cool. "You don't come in here asking about Trigger, man. Bad way to end a night." "Relax," I said, folding my hands on the table. "If I wanted trouble, I wouldn't be talking. But I need information, and you seem like the type to deliver." Best to play on his ego, there were many more in the room that looked better suited for such a conversation, and he knew that. So it's best for him to believe that I thought he was the best option, not like he wasn't for me. "He's dumb." He narrowed his eyes. "You've got a real mouth on you for someone who doesn't know the rules." "Maybe. Or maybe I know enough to find you interesting." My tone was even, almost bored. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a negative reaction from me. He leaned forward, resting his elbow on the table. "You don't seem like the usual type. What's your angle?" "My angle," I said, leaning forward just enough to match him, "is figuring out how someone like you gets trusted to move product. Must have taken a lot to prove yourself to the boss." That hit a nerve, and there was a flicker of defensiveness on his face. "I'm trusted because I deliver. Got clients all over the city, different areas on different nights. It's about knowing your territory." "Sounds complicated," I said, my voice laced with feigned admiration. "Must be hard to keep track of all the drop points, let alone the timing." He snorted. "That's why I get paid the big bucks. Not everyone can handle the pressure." I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch again. He was talking now, but I still needed specifics. "So, what's the secret? Certain areas better than others?" He laughed, a sharp hollow sound. "You think I'm just gonna hand you my map? Get lost." I felt a smirk creep onto my face, leaning back in my chair. "I think you want people to know how good you are. A guy like you shouldn't keep secrets for long." His companions exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. The tension was thick, but I stayed calm, waiting him out. Finally he cracked, if only to show off. Fine. West District on Thursdays, South District on Saturdays. Happy now. He spat the words like they were worthless, but they were what I needed. Ecstatic. I said, standing. Pleasure doing business with you. It was morning. I snuck my way into a cheap hotel and spent the night in one of the unused rooms. I would pay, but that would be such a waste. After taking a quick shower, I got out again. The West District wore a different face in the light of the day, but it wasn't any softer. The sun was an unkind artist, highlighting every crack, every stain, everything that was carved onto the streets. The alleys still yawned with menace, everything felt more exposed. My steps were unhurried, blending into the noise of the environment. To the untrained eye, the district might seem normal, a tangle of life without any rhyme or reason. But I saw the patterns, the rhythm beneath the chaos. DISCLAIMER trucks came and went with precise intervals. Vendors shouted at the right volumes to cover whispered conversations. A man with a polished briefcase lingered too long near a rundown corner store, his posture betraying an edge of unease. I started at Shinji's, the same convenience store. The morning crowd was mundane enough, construction workers grabbing energy drinks, an old man buying cigarettes, a mother wrangling her toddler while stuffing groceries into a worn backpack. People came and went, their purchases nondescript. No one lingered, not even to count their change. And then there were the ones who didn't buy anything at all. I leaned against a lamppost pretending to scroll through my phone while my eyes tracked everything. A black van pulled up, its windows so dark they could have been painted. Two men emerged, one carrying a plain black box, the other keeping watch. The exchange was quick. The box disappeared behind the counter, and the men were gone before the van's engine even cooled. Too quick and too clean. A barbershop was my next stop. In the daylight it looked unassuming, old, and with faded paint. The type of place that looked like it relied more so on regulars rather than walk-ins. Through the glass I caught a glance of that same scarred man from the night before. He sat in one of the chairs, but he wasn't getting his hair cut. 3 others surrounded him, their postures stiff with deference. They weren't here for fades and trims. I lingered outside, pretending to check my reflection in the window. The conversation was muffled, but the body language was loud. The scarred man was in control, his gestures measured but commanding. The others leaned in when he spoke, nodding like obedient soldiers. By mid-afternoon, I'd pieced together enough of the puzzle to know where to press. The West District's ecosystem operated like clockwork, and if I wanted answers, I'd need to find the right cog to jam. That's when I saw him, a dealer. He was standing near a fruit cart, gold chains catching the sunlight like bait. His posture screamed, "Look at me," and yet he was too conspicuous to be anything but another small-time player. I approached the cart, pretending to browse the fruit. The vendor took one look at me and greeted me with a forced smile, his eyes flicking nervously around. "You got good oranges?" I asked, keeping my tone casual and friendly. "Best in the district," he replied with a tight voice. The dealer chuckled and cut into the conversation. "You don't look like a local." His voice was dripping with mockery. "Just passing through, I wanted to see what this city had to offer." I replied, not bothering to look up at him. He laughed again, louder this time. "Oh, we've got all kinds of offerings. Depends on what you're looking for." I turned to face him, expression neutral and ball of steel. "I heard trigger runs through here." The laughter stopped and the man at the stall stilled. He was scared. He was just an innocent man then. That's not exactly public knowledge. "Neither is your supplier," I fired back, nodding at his gold chains. "But you are here flaunting it like a billboard. You've got quite a sharp mouth." His bravado snapped. "And you've got a fragile ego for a middleman." I said, "I'm not here to cause trouble, I just want information." "What's in it for me?" "Your teeth," I said flatly. The silence lingered for a minute. I thought he'd test me. The poor man at the stall was shivering in his spot. Then the dealer laughed. It was a forced and bitter laugh. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he sighed. "What do you want to know?" Where do the shipments come in? And no vague answers. Shinji's, the barbershop closest to it, as well as the docks. Good, I tested him for those answers. I knew of the former too, but the docks? I repeated. What time? Late. Midnight. They like to keep it quiet. I appreciate the tip. In quick motion I stepped in close and quickly knocked him out with a hard hit to the jugular. I would have to find a place to stash him. I wouldn't want him waking up too soon and alerting people that I was asking too much questions. I patted down his pockets and pulled out a big wad of cash. I then turned around to the fruit stall attendant. I took out a few bills and said, "Nothing happened here, right, sir?" He hesitantly took the money with shaky hands and nodded. He didn't say a word. And if things continued to go right, he wouldn't say a word. The fog around the docks was thick, rolling over the water like an unseen monster, swallowing anything in its path. I stood on a high point near the warehouses. My shoes were steady on the cold concrete. A big 16-wheeler rolled into the bay and parked, leaving its engine on. I'd seen the guards. I'd also seen their sloppy postures, the way they never truly scanned their surroundings. That kind of complacency only came after doing the same monotonous drivel every day. It was hard to shame. I waited, watching the unloading process through a pair of binoculars I had made with paper while I crouched atop a container obscured by the smoke. The men were careful as they pulled in boxes from a containment ship. It was almost ritualistic. I noticed a lack of chatter that I had almost come to expect. The leader of this operation was a tall man, with a jagged scar across his left cheek. He spoke in clipped sentences, directing the unloading process with a harsh voice. His crew moved like clockwork. All right. I brought my binoculars down and clapped my hands. Once they separated again, paper formed and it had taken the shape of a small bird. Its wings were barely fluttering as it took flight and hovered above the scene. The truck rumbled away after the last crate was loaded. The shipment was moving into the city. Time to move. I jumped high and on my back paper wings formed and I soared high in the sky, above the clouds. The smaller bird I created was keeping track while I stayed high up to avoid potentially being seen. You could never be too cautious. We arrived at an unassuming building nestled behind a few warehouses. The place was almost invisible, tucked away from the street like a secret. 2 guards stood at the entrance, one of them yawning, the other checking his watch. They barely glanced at the truck, only signaling for it to pass through the narrow gates. I couldn't see inside, but the setup was easy enough to decipher. They were using the same quiet entry method to move the goods inside. That meant one thing. The contents weren't just valuable, they were dangerous. As the truck entered, I moved closer to the building's side. There was a window just high enough for me to peer through. I caught a glimpse of the warehouse floor, rows of crates stacked neatly in the back. A few men stood around speaking in hushed tones. "Move it by morning, the boss is expecting a full inventory." One of them muttered. Another man, heavier and older, laughed. "Yeah, well, there better be a good excuse if it's late again." I slipped in through a side door, never making a sound. I could hear men's voices in the distance, but they were too far to make anything out clearly. Moving with precision, I scanned the room. There were documents stacked near the back, scattered across a desk. I decided to form a piece of paper in my hand and manipulated its size into a razor-sharp, thin sheet and sent it flying across the room. It hovered silently over the papers, copying every word. Every detail dented itself onto the sheet. Within seconds, I had everything. Shipment details, code words, names of people higher up in the operation too. And one name stood out clearly, Kai Chisaki. That was the Yakuza boss known as Overhaul. With the documents in hand, I made my way over to the exit as the men continued their chatter. I had to move quickly now. There was too much information to process, and it was only a matter of time before they realized someone was poking around in their business. I found my way back into the same small 3-star hotel room I had spent the previous night in. I realized that I was not alone. In fact, it was that same dealer who was here with me. I couldn't find anywhere to stuff him, so I thought it best to just keep him tied up in this hotel room. Since he wouldn't stop mumbling, I had to knock him out again and put him in the bathroom. He was stripped down to his underwear and only fed when necessary. Other than that, he was kept tied up, Since he was in the bathroom, he could use it when he needed and struggle all day for all I care. The room was simple, nothing special. The sheets were clean at least, but the bed was not as comfortable as the ones in the orphanage. But I shouldn't be complaining since I didn't even pay to get in. I had set the documents out onto a desk and pulled out a pen, tracing over all the outlines to make sense of it all. The first page detailed logistics of trigger distribution, the routes and names I already knew. But then there was something new, something different. An experimental compound being mixed into trigger. It was a drag called delirium, a substance designed to amplify the effects of trigger. That already sounds bad. Amplifying a drag meant to amplify quirks. That just sounds stupid. But then I understood why people continued taking it. Delirium was like a second wind for whoever took it. Strength, speed, agility, each hit felt like the body was on fire, a pure high that coursed through the veins like an electric jolt. And as the user's body adapted, they craved more. It didn't take long for consequences to follow. Physical deterioration, hallucinations, loss of motor control, and eventually, an overwhelming sense of paranoia and rage. Users who overdosed would die by every blood vessel in the body bursting. And then the heart. That reminded me of the conversation at the Fight Club. That's probably what they meant by popping like a balloon. And then the next part. Something even worse as I read on. A small notation in the corner of a page caught my attention. Serum X. It was listed alongside trigger and delirium in a complex formula. I skimmed the page further, piecing together what was there. Serum X was designed to temporarily erase a person's quirk. The finished product came in the design of a bullet, meant to be injected into the bloodstream, gaining access to the quirk factor and then destroying it. But it would only last for a day, 36 hours at most. I find it hard to believe they would want to stop it there. After thinking on it, I began to weigh my options here. This seemed like a very dangerous endeavor. I should probably bring this to the heroes. That's what anybody else in my position would do, isn't it? But nobody else is me. Nobody else has the same indifference or distrust in the heroes like I do. Nobody has the capabilities that I have. And where else do I go but forward? The documents had more references of human blood. The compounds were mixed in a way that suggested it wasn't just any blood. There was a connection between the serum and the rare blood trait. Or quirk. What? I frowned, scanning the lines for anything that explained it, but the details were scarce. The implications were there. The need for this blood, possibly the blood of a person with a strong or unique quirk. It wasn't just a side effect of the drag, it was a key ingredient for the bullet. I felt my pulse quicken as I processed the information. Overhaul was mixing delirium with trigger to enhance quirks, but he was also creating a bullet that would erase them. Sounded like a nightmare. I wonder what his quirk is? Or maybe it's the quirk of someone around him that makes it all possible. I looked over the documents one more time, taking mental notes of every name, every location, every hint that would lead me to understanding what Overhaul was really doing. I seemed to be dealing with a very dark and troubling crime syndicate here. I stood in the ring with a plain white mask on made from paper, my opponent stalking towards me, his arms like slabs of granite. His quirk was simple, hardening his skin to stone. Intimidating to an average person, but predictable. Each move telegraphed before he even made them. This is the third match Aya had set me up with. I kept her number, but I didn't think I would really need it after she lead me to Kyushu. She's been raking in on her 70% cut, feeding me to whoever was down to fight me over here. A parasite in heels she is, but she's good at what she does. The brute charged at me, his stone-covered fists slamming the air where my head had been a second ago. I ducked, pivoting smoothly to his blind spot. The crowd erupted at the near miss, but I was already watching out for his next move. He wasn't slow, but his quirk made him overconfident. I shaped a sheet of paper from my wrist into a thin, gleaming blade. With a flick of my hand, it arced toward his shoulder, cutting through the gap in his stone-like armor. He roared in pain, swinging wildly. Fights like these weren't about the brute strength, it was control of perception and everything that comes next. Just like my little grievances against the shy Hisaiki. A shipment lost in the sea here, a warehouse scorched there. Nothing too loud, Nothing that can be traced to me. It had been going on for the last week now. It should be enough to rattle them and force them to act. The brute stumbled, his balance faltering as I swept his legs out from under him. Before he could hit the ground, I reshaped the blade into a cord, binding his arms behind his back. He collapsed face first onto the mat, struggling against the bonds as the referee stepped in declaring my victory. Yeah, this fighting ring was a little different, a lot more organized. The roar of the crowd was the same though, deafening. But that wasn't what had caught my attention, it was the silence. The room shifted, a ripple of unease spreading throughout the spectators as the crowd parted like Moses had just walked through. A man stepped through, hands in his pockets. He wore an impeccable dress shirt and tie despite the grimy venue. The plague doctor's mask over his face was unmistakable. Overhaul. Well, sheet. He stopped at the edge of the ring, his head tilting slightly as he regarded me. The crowd's whispers reached a fever pitch, but no one dared to step closer. You, he said in a voice that was calm and commanding. Do you want to fight me? I hesitated, my mind racing. Of course not, you maniac. But I didn't say that. Although I didn't know what his quirk was, judging from the crowd and overall atmosphere, I expected it to be dangerous. No, I replied, keeping my voice even. I don't. Overhaul nodded once, almost approvingly. Then follow me. He gestured for me to follow, then turned around and walked, waiting for me to follow his trail. I looked at the crowd to gauge their reactions. They parted even further, their fear of him palpable. This is the moment I've been waiting for. I stepped out of the ring, adjusting the simple mask I'd crafted from my quirk. It hid my expression, but my mind was sharp. We arrived at a sleek black car outside the venue. Overhaul opened the door, gesturing for me to get in without a word. The ride to the base was silent, the tension so thick I could cut it with a paper knife, one made by me, of course. Overhaul didn't speak, and neither did I. The silence felt heavy, as though every word held weight, every glance held meaning. Beside Overhaul, a man sat stiffly. His presence was cold, unsettling. I hadn't seen him before, something about him screamed authority. Wait. I think that's Shin Nemoto. His thin, angular face was expressionless, but his eyes, dark and sharp, seemed to pierce through me. The distrust couldn't be hidden by the glasses that framed them. His hair was black and slicked back, which added to the clinical look he had. His aura was all-encompassing. The car's tires hummed softly as we drove through the dark, winding streets. The base, I knew, was not a place anyone would go willingly. It was a fortress. It was his home. We arrived. Overhaul led the way through sterile hallways. My mask remained intact, hiding my face, but my mind was already working, calculating ways to escape if it came down to it. There was no way I could let my guard down in front of the head of operation. Inside a small and dimly lit room, Overhaul took a seat at the head of a cold metal table. Nemoto stood at attention beside him, his presence intimidating without uttering a single word. I was sat on the opposite end, but I was told to stand close enough to where they could both reach me. You're a dangerous one, Overhaul said, his voice low and controlled. Not the type to get noticed easily, and yet, here you are. I didn't respond. What was there to say to that? To someone who sounded so ready to kill at a moment's notice. What's your real name? I hesitated for a moment. There was no way I was giving my real name. So a fake would do. Kenta Hayakawa. The sound of leather creaking felt louder than it should have in the silence of the room. Your real name? Shin Nemoto's voice rung out. His expressionless face held a lot more contempt within it. I felt the air around me shift, a subtle but unmistakable pressure. His quirk. A compulsion crept in. While a guinea pig at Eden, I was made to train to resist mind-altering powers. So even though this one was incredibly strong, there was always the chance of me fighting it off. But I didn't want to give that away if it were to be found out. Plus, resisting once would only make it harder for me to do so again. Kobe Arakawa. I let it slip out of me. Overhaul tilted his head slightly, studying me with renewed interest. Arakawa, he repeated, his tone pensive. Who's pulling your strings? I'm not working for anyone. My voice didn't waver. Then tell me, Kobe, Overhaul said, his tone colder. Do you have any previous affiliations? Work for anyone? Law enforcement, maybe the heroes? My throat tightened. Truthfully, I still have a sister in a hero school, and previous affiliation could very well be the Eden Project. But I trusted in what would come out. There was pain in my throat though. Lying was like second nature. It being deprived from me didn't feel right. I'm not affiliated with law enforcement, and I got no love for heroes. Overhaul pressed further. Aspirations? You must have something you want. What's your goal? Now, that question hit harder than the rest. Goals. I had none. I think I wanted to be a hero when I was younger, but it was no great aspiration. And I was almost fully put off by it after being sent to be a part of that stupid project. They didn't instill any goals in me other than working towards being a hero. Now that I didn't go down that path, there was nothing. Answer. I don't have any. The city had been restless lately. Kyushu felt like it was becoming a pressure cooker. And it was angering Overhaul. Disruption was growing in waves to the intricate system Overhaul had spent years building. Warehouses were burning down, stock was missing, his dealers were disappearing too, some leaving the city or at least trying to escape after they mismanaged product. He stood in his office, gloved fingers tracing the edge of his pristine desk. The room was immaculate as always, a sanctuary from the filth he loathed. The faint hum of the ventilation system barely masked the sound of distant rain tapping against the windows. Why are things going like this? They were unseen, but veins bulged in his hands. Along with the growing disorder, it allowed for police and heroes to start getting entangled with city affairs. He's had to pull back on certain operations. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Overhaul clenched his fists, feeling the smooth leather stretch over his knuckles. He'd dealt with weakness among subordinates. Failed ideals. The filth of this world encroaching on his vision. But this felt different, insidious, like a disease festering and growing. He thought that maybe a new villain was in town. But no names were coming to mind. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. Whispers had reached him about a new figure emerging in the underground fighting circuits. A good amount of money was being made there for him. He did own all the land these fights took place in after all. But this new fighter had only appeared a few short days before the attacks began. Overhaul didn't believe in coincidences. Someone like that wouldn't appear without reason. He tapped his fingers on his desk, the rhythmic sounds calming his thoughts. He's recruited from there before with Rappa and Tengai, and he wanted that to be the last time, even though it was at least 2 years since then. Recruiting from such a volatile environment wasn't his style, it wasn't smart. But these circumstances demand flexibility. If the fighter had potential, he could be useful in safeguarding purposes for the transition. Overhaul had planned to move his base of operations since more heroes were crowding around the area. He couldn't afford to let anything slip through the growing cracks. Later that evening, he sat across from the masked fighter, Kobe Arakawa. Calm under pressure. He noted. Kobe answered Nemoto's questions with surprising composure. Most would crumble, their secrets would spill out like an open wound. But this one could resist, if only slightly. Not invulnerable but impressive. Overhaul looked at the mask Kobe wore. It was simple and functional. It spoke of someone who valued efficiency over vanity. That could be useful. Why are you in this city? Nemoto asked. His tone was heavy and suspicious, as it should be. Overhaul's golden eyes flickered with a faint amusement, watching the darker-skinned boy answer. For money, Kobe said in an even tone. Money. Overhaul's lips twitched in the barest hint of disdain. Everyone wanted money. But that was fine, it just made it easier to work with him. And where are you from? Overhaul asked him, leaning forward slightly. Mizudafu, in the Shizuoka prefecture. Overhaul's brow raised ever so slightly. Mizudafu, the city carried weight. Heroes, Uehai, the birthplace of legends. It was like a natural breeding ground for them. Mizudafu, he repeated, his tone was sharp. A hub for heroes. People who think they can rewrite the laws of the world with brute force, and here you are. Somehow you didn't fall into that crowd. Silence followed, stretching long and thin. Overhaul didn't rush. He savored moments like this, letting the pressure build up. The slightest shift in body language revealed volumes, but Kobe didn't falter, which on its own told him enough. Then came the last question. He was sure they knew of him. He had let him win his fights in the city long enough now, so he should know of who he is and how he is the one to run things. Have you been messing with my product in this city? His voice dropped, each word measured and sharp as a scalpel. The kid tilted his head slightly. If it's causing you problems, it's got nothing to do with me. All I've done here is related to me and earning. It was ambiguous, but it was still under Nemoto's quirk, and Overhaul trusted that. The boy's tone was devoid of hostility. Overhaul's brow furrowed, dissatisfaction creeping in. The answer was true, but its vagueness grated on him. He could ask again. If you're lying to me, I'll find out. And you'll suffer a fate worse than death. I'd expect nothing less. The sound of my shoes echoed faintly as I followed Overhaul through the faint light tunnels of the Yakuza's base. The air down here was thick, almost sterile, as though he sanitized every molecule down here himself. Walls of polished and clean concrete loomed on either side, blank and featureless, except for the occasional metal door. There was a stillness to it, one that reminded me of the cold facility I was trapped in. Overhaul walked with a measured, clinical pace, hands lazily hanging on each side of him. He hasn't said anything since the little interview we had earlier, but his presence was loud enough. It pressed against me. I had kept my mask on, grateful for the anonymity it granted. He hadn't insisted I'd take it off yet, which meant he was still feeling me out. But that worked in my favor. This is the foundation of what we've built, Overhaul began. His voice was cool and deliberate. It may not look like much, but efficiency doesn't need aesthetics. I glanced around, letting my eyes linger on the stark corridors, the lighting, the breeze of electricity in the air. No wasted space here, no decorations. Just like him. We stopped in front of a reinforced, steel door, and Overhaul pulled a key from his pocket. The lock clicked open with a heavy sound that reverberated through the hallway. He stepped inside, gesturing for me to follow. The room was grotesque. Cages lined the walls, each housing creatures that didn't look like they should have existed in this world. One had a wolf-like animal with feathered wings. Another contained a snake with legs that resembled a lizard. They shifted and moved, restlessly, their eyes glowing faintly under the harsh light. This, Overhaul said, gesturing to the room, is a demonstration of my potential. I forced myself to remain still. I didn't let it show, easier with the mask on. These creatures, he continued, are the result of combining traits at a molecular level. My quirk allows me to disassemble and reassemble matter at will. This includes living beings. Dangerous. He walked over to one of the cages, pulling back tarp to reveal a figure slumped inside. My initial thought was that they were someone with a mutant quirk, a human with cat-like features, but the longer I looked, the more I realized how wrong I was. This one, Overhaul said, his voice was deep and cold, was one of my subordinates. He failed me, so I gave him a new purpose. The figure stirred slightly, its feline eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It let out a guttural cat's cry in a growl of a human tone. To make it easier for me, I wear down the mind during the process, Overhaul began explaining. What remains when I merge human and animal then is the primal instinct, overlaid with a fragment of their original consciousness. Useful in some ways, but limited. A reminder of what happens when you mess up in this family. I didn't say anything, I didn't react. It was disgusting, mortifying, and even gave me second thoughts about this place, the thought of running away. This, Overhaul turned back to me, is why I need someone competent. Someone who won't fail. Everyone gets 2 strikes and they're out. He gestured for me to follow again, leading me out of the room and into another corridor. My pulse quickened as we walked, the memory of that still fresh in my mind. Eventually we reached another door. This one less imposing, but the air around it felt heavier. Overhaul opened it without hesitation, and I stepped inside. The room was sparse, almost clinical. A single bed in the corner, its sheets neatly folded. The walls were bare, save for a few cracks that stretched out like veins. And in the center of the room, curled up on the floor, was a small girl with a little horn on her head. She looked up as we entered, her wide, frightened eyes locking on to Overhaul immediately. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just trembled, her hands clutching the hem of her dress like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "This," Overhaul said with a softer and indifferent voice now, "is what you'll be safeguarding." I didn't respond yet. My eyes were fixed on her, on the way she flinched at every movement he made, the way her whole body seemed to shrink in on itself. The room felt heavier now. I looked away from the child. I focused on the details instead, the reinforced locks on the door, the hidden cameras in the corner, the faint scent of antiseptic in the air. Overhaul turned to me, his golden eyes piercing through the dim light. "Take off your mask," he said. I reached slowly, undoing the paper mask, and letting it fall away into nothingness. For a moment he said nothing, just standing there studying me with the same calculating gaze. "This is your chance," he said firmly. "Prove yourself useful and you'll find your place here. And you'll suffer." He didn't need to specify on how. I nodded once and the mask slipped back into place. He started to leave. "Get to know Eri. If you want to leave or I call you up, just press the green buzzer, it will open the door for you." The buzzer was high up on the wall. I could reach it, but the child at my back certainly couldn't. That was the frightened child's name. The door clicked shut behind Overhaul, leaving me alone in the sterile room with the trembling girl. Her fragile form seemed even smaller against the empty expanse of the space. Her name echoed in my mind as I glanced at the green buzzer high up on the wall. I crouched low, careful not to make any sudden movements, and kept my tone low. No doubt the room was hooked with listening devices. I could my mask. "Eri, right?" She didn't respond, only shrank further into herself. Her small hands clung tightly to the fabric of her dress, which I could tell was supposed to be white. "I'm not here to hurt you," I tried again, though the words felt hollow even for me. How many times had she heard a lie disguised as reassurance? I sat cross-legged on the cold floor, making myself seem smaller, less imposing. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Her ruby-colored eyes watched me with fear, like a cornered animal. The weight of the room pressed down harder, and I couldn't keep my mind from wandering. How long had she been kept here? How many others had passed through those doors to shatter the fragile trust she had left? I leaned back on the wall, my gaze flickering to the cracks out across the ceiling. I could see a deep burgundy color in some of the cracks. Was that blood? I looked back at the kid who didn't take her eyes off of me. "Do you want me to stay quiet?" I asked softly, not expecting an answer. To my surprise, she gave the faintest of nods, almost imperceptible. I respected it, leaning my head back and letting the silence reclaim the room. It could be a start. The convoy rattled down the uneven roads toward Hamamatsu. The engine sound was occasionally interrupted by the soft crunch of gravel beneath the tires. I sat in the back of the pickup truck, wedged between mismatched furniture and Eri, who sat quietly beside me, still shivering in fear, or maybe she was cold. I found a blanket and got one of my paper constructs in the form of small birds, carry it over to her and wrap itself around her. She looked surprised and then turned to me. I only shown a slight nod before looking away. The air smelled of varnished wood and something faintly metallic, probably from the crates behind us. The 4 precepts accompanying us were named Rappa, Chronostasis, Tenai, and Sakaki. They filled the space with their conversation. Rappa, the largest one of the 4, was the loudest. "Tenai, I want to know if your shield could really stop me if I went all out," he said, pounding a fist to his palm. Tenai didn't bother to look up at his large figure. "Rappa, my barrier is impervious. You'd break every bone in your hand and wouldn't even make a dent." "Yeah." Rappa leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a challenge. "Maybe we should test that once we get to the new compound now. Bet you'd be singing a different tune by then." Chronostasis sighed, his tone clipped. "Both of you should save your energy, plus it's not a new compound, Rappa. The boss said he grew up there with the last boss." Sakaki chuckled, brushing hair from his face. "Relax, let them brawl. It's not like anyone's going to cry if Rappa ends up with a broken jaw." Their dumb laughter was jarring to hear. They were talking about basically nothing. It was good for Kobe to learn more about potential quirks, For some they literally made it obvious in the name they decided to give themselves, like chronostasis. Eri shifted beside me, drawing my attention. Her small frame was hunched and her knees were pulled into her chest as if to make herself invisible. She didn't even flinch when the truck had hit a pothole, but her hands tightened around the blanket. I noticed it last night. Eri has a lot of scars, coursing her forearms. It was something overhaul most likely caused. I reached into my bag and pulled out a bottle of water and a small packet of crackers. I nudged her gently with my elbow, holding them out. She glanced at me, her ruby-red eyes wary, but after a moment, she hesitantly took the offering. She didn't say thank you, but the way she clutched them to her chest was enough. The conversation around us continued, but it felt like background noise, a meaningless hum. Eri nibbled on the crackers, her movements cautious, as if someone might snatch them away. I leaned back against the truck bed, letting my head rest against the worn cushion. We were close now. Through the windows in the front, we could see a checkpoint. One problem though, it was barricaded by a small group of uniformed heroes. Gang Orca and his sidekicks. The driver up front got jittery. He cursed under his breath. "Sheet," he muttered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I forgot my DMN record." "What are you talking about?" Rappa barked, leaning forward. "I've got priors and I'm wanted for a burglary." He was already wanted and didn't want to go back. "If they scan my ID, we're screwed." Panic laced his voice, and without waiting for a response, he slammed his foot on the gas, swerving around the barricade. The heroes reacted instantly. Gang Orca, his massive and imposing form, stepped forward, raising his left hand. The air thickened around us, and the sound of the truck's tires screeching against the road was drowned out by his commanding voice. "Stop the vehicle." The driver couldn't stop. Instead, he reached for something under his seat. "This idiot is going to get us killed." Before he could act, a second truck veered off the road, blocking the path of the pursuing heroes. Chaos erupted. Rappa hooped in excitement, punching massive holes and leaping out of the truck before it even stopped. Finally, some action. He charged straight for Gang Orca. Tengai followed, his barrier shimmering into existence, shielding Rappa and the front of our truck. I stayed where I was, keeping a hand on Eri. My eyes scanned the chaos and only stopped when I saw her. "Yuki, my sister. What's she doing here?" "Dumb question. She's doing a work placement with Gang Orca, most likely." She moved with the eyes of a beast. How could bright purple jewels look so beastly? Her jet black curls were tied in a ponytail. Her hero outfit was a sleek combination of dark blues and silver. It only enhanced her cold features. She's already putting her quirk to use. She could give life to inanimate objects to which she commanded. Street signs bent and twisted under her control, forming makeshift weapons and barriers to fight off both Tengai and Rappa, as well as Chronostasis, who was edging in closer. There was no way I was joining that battle. Having her see me would be the wrong move. It had been over a month since I had last seen her. Not that it mattered, we weren't that close. Maybe we had been when we were just kids, but that was it. She'd always been the perfect one, while I was the opposite. Seeing her now didn't fill me with any kind of longing or nostalgia, just frustration. I should get out of here. "New guy." Sakiki's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. "Pick up Eri, we're leaving while they hold off the heroes." "Now." I didn't need to be told twice. I scooped Eri in my arms, her small frame trembling against me, and then I bolted. I was fast, much faster than Sakiki, which made me slow down and allow him to keep up. It was to be expected. Sakiki was an alcoholic. His quirk kind of required it, but that's not to say I enjoyed being slowed down by him. We ducked into the forests. The sounds of the fight were becoming more distant. A large paper bird formed and lifted Sakiki. "Hey, I didn't ask for this." Since I decided to move faster, I needed him to keep up. He should be happy for my goodwill. "Hey, new guy. Our new ride is just ahead, off that road." Right, when traveling like this, with extra cargo, the overhaul made sure there were multiple cars following each other, in case of incidents like this. "Let's move." We stepped in the car this time. A sleek black edition with two well-dressed men in the front, instead of the big truck that stuck out on these otherwise quiet roads. As the car sped off, I realized Eri was still curled against me, feeling the warmth. She seemed exhausted. I thought on what could have happened. I could have gotten snatched by my own sister. If she had caught me, then what would she even look for any reason I could give for being here? I don't believe she could. She would let the police take me away to a station and lock me up for operating in a controlled syndicate group. I don't even know the full extent of the Shy Heiseki and Overhaul, which was the original reason for me being here. I wanted to find out more about them, and if they had any relation to Eden, the chances of that now were incredibly low. So now I just needed to learn more about them, dismantle the group and slip away unnoticed, and with Eri. No kid should be stuck in what was clearly an abusive situation with someone that may not even be her family. The compound in Hamamatsu was a blend of utilitarian design mixed with a lingering sentimentality. Its outer structure, nestled in a stretch of dense forest, seemed unassuming. A drab-weathered house surrounded by thick, moss-covered walls. A wrought iron gate marked the entrance, rusted but still imposing, like a sentinel daring you to question its purpose. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, the quiet broken only by the occasional chirp of unseen birds. The first room we entered was warm and held remnants of a place that used to be lived in. This way, Overhaul led us through the space, an inconspicuous door at the end of the hall. We descended a steep staircase that seemed to stretch endlessly into the earth. Each step was colder than the last, and by the time we reached the bottom, the air was damp and metallic. Overhaul pushed open another door, revealing the compound's hidden underground structure. The space was the exact same as the last one. The only difference I could see was when we made it to Eri's room. More child-appropriate. Her room was painted in soft pastels, the walls adorned with stenciled flowers and animals. A small bed with fluffy pink blankets stood against the one corner, flanked by shelves stocked with toys and books. What was the point of the books, though? I found out early on that the kid can't even read. This just seemed like a desperate attempt to make her feel somewhat normal, a jarring contrast to what her life actually was. Overhaul glanced to Sakaki and I. His eyes momentarily were devoid of any hostility. Great work, you two. Getting here without compromising the mission. Thank you, boss. Sakaki bowed and I nodded in acknowledgement, seeing no reason to bow. Overhaul turned to Eri. This will be your new room. Enjoy it. I'll be back in a few hours to continue where we left off last time. It's been a while. Of doing what? I was starting to get the feeling that I was hired by a freak. If so, I'd have to nab the kid and run off even sooner without my own little investigation. Eri didn't respond to him. Instead, her eyes darted everywhere but him. She even glanced over to me. Looking for what? Reassurance? Maybe. I gave her a small little nod and she hesitantly stepped into the room. I do wonder if that kid's mute. It wouldn't be surprising. The room is unnervingly clean. Overhaul had explained that he was a germaphobe, but I never thought it could go this far. Overhaul wanted me in this room by a certain time. I asked him what it is he actually does with Eri. He just told me to come and watch. Once I stepped in the room, there was a coppery smell that I couldn't quite ignore. It pieced together so much that occupied my mind that I almost ignored the fact that some other precept members were also in the room. Overhaul stood at the center of the room, his figure poised and clinical. Eri sat, strapped to a table, her small frame dwarfed by the machinery surrounding her. She held back her screams, but tears still flowed down her face. She just sat there, no struggle, motionless and resigned. Her wide ruby-red eyes staring blankly ahead, accepting this routine. I stood to the side, my back to the cold, sterile wall, arms crossed, every muscle in my body coiled tight. I was nothing more than a shadow in the room, watching silently. Overhaul's voice cut through the silence like the scalpel in his hands. Hold her still. Two subordinates in lab coats stepped forward and tightened the restraints. They wore face masks, but their eyes showed nothing but an unfeeling resolve. The first needle slid into her arm, and Eri flinched, a tiny, instinctive twitch she couldn't suppress. I felt my jaw clench involuntarily. I stayed composed and kept my breathing even. Play the part. Stay in control. The child's blood, Overhaul started, his tone as precise as his movements, is key to erasing the disease that plagues this world. A cure for the chaos that quirks have brought forward. She is the cornerstone to that new era. Order. It was like a cold mantra that defined everything about this man. Yet as he worked there was no hint of cruelty. His actions were most certainly cruel, but he didn't see it that way. To him it was just a cure. The needle filled with crimson, the liquid catching the harsh light as it siphoned it away. It felt like a blow to my gut. Eri flinched again, her tiny fists curling against the straps. I looked away for a little bit, letting my eyes scan the room. There were steel counters, vials of what I assumed to be her blood, the faint dark stains in the corners that no amount of bleach could scrub fully clean. Everything in this place felt wrong, but nothing more so than the silence. "Focus," Overhaul said, his gaze flickering to my direction. A command cool and impersonal. I exhaled slowly and let my eyes fall back on the scene in front of me. Eri's breathing had grown shallow, her small chest rising and falling rapidly. Overhaul stuttered in place. "Screw it. That's enough for today," he declared. He removed the needle and handed the vial to one of the doctors and watched as they stepped away without a word. The restraints were undone. Eri sagged against the table, her strength depleted. The room fell silent again, save for the faint hum of machinery. Overhaul straightened and turned towards me. "Kobe," he said, his voice cut through the oppressive stillness. "You've been useful, even for the short time you've been here. But you're not just a bystander, you've shown restraint, composure, and resolve. Qualities this family needs. You're not one of the 8 precepts, but you'll have a role here. A title." I remained still, my expression had went unchanged. "From this day forward you will be Soryu. Our blue dragon. A sentinel, guarding the integrity of our work. Reliable." The name felt powerful. As Overhaul said it, he gestured to Eri. Sure, the name felt strong, nice even. But it was nothing more than a tightening chain to keep me close to the organization. "You'll operate outside of the standard hierarchy, but don't forget, you are loyal to me." "Understood, boss," I replied. That was the first time that I had referred to him by that. I inclined my head slightly, acknowledging his words but revealing nothing. As he turned away, my gaze flickered to Eri, still trembling. Her wide, tear-stricken eyes were on me, a silent plea for salvation I couldn't answer. Not yet. Soryu. A guardian of a twisted empire. For now, I would wear the name and play the part. But deep inside, the resolve I had been nurturing burned brighter. Soon I would turn their own shadow against them. Overhaul had sent me on a mission. Heroes were still following our trail, so I was to figure out if they were any major heroes or hero agencies on his case. So here I was, walking the streets of Chatter. My hood was pulled low as I blended in with the sea of faces. I listened to fragments of conversations and one interested me a lot. UA was attacked. UA High School, the most known hero school in the country with the most heroes of the top 10 coming from there. That same UA was attacked by a group that called themselves the League of Villains. I'm sure a lot of thought went into that name. But the whole idea sounded ridiculous. Attacking a hero school, one filled to the brim with heroes, one being the #1 hero of the entire nation. I could only assume it went bad for them. Also, sneaking into a hero school must have taken some effort. Maybe they put all their effort into doing that instead of coming up with a group name. They probably thought to pick off future heroes and scare away the rest from being heroes. If I was a villain, I stopped that train of thought. As I am now, I basically am one. One with a mission. A glint caught my eye, drawing my gaze to a figure near the edge of the market. A hero. Her uniform was striking, sleek with blue accents that caught light like fractured water. It was striking and purposeful. She openly engaged with people as she passed by them. Her straightforward demeanor left little room for subtlety. A badge on her chest caught my eye. It was a keepsake from a hero school, from Shiketsu High. That explained the confidence in her gait. She graduated from one of the top hero schools in the country, second only to UA. She was tall, probably 5 feet. Her short choppy hair was a bright coppery red, framing a lightly freckled face. Her emerald green eyes were sharp, focused, and a little too obvious with their intent on searching for something in the crowd. I finally recognized her as the hero Glasslock. She had gathered up a recent buzz after a string of perfect rescues. Her quirk was something to do with glass. It was hinted all over her costume, like the shards on her gauntlets. I don't know if she creates it though. I slipped deeper into the crowd, but something tugged at my awareness. A presence, steady and deliberate. I glanced at a shop window's reflection and spotted him, Centipede. He wasn't someone that was hard to miss, his segmented limbs protruding slightly from his bulky hero uniform. He moved with a predator's patience, following at a distance. Centipede was familiar. Not personally. He works for Sir Night Eye, then chances of the girl ahead working with him is also high. He was no rookie. I quickened my pace, testing their reaction. My mask slipped on under my hood, unseen. Centipede matched my speed, closing the distance slightly. Glasslock adjusted her position ahead of me. The trap. I prefer to know when I'm being hunted. I turned the corner, slipping down a quieter street, the noise of the walking crowd fading behind me. My pulse quickened. Centipede had narrowed the gap between us, and I had lost sight of Glasslock. I doubt she crouched, otherwise some people may have brought attention to it. The alley stretched into a wide plaza with glass-fronted shops. The sunlight refracted off the panes, casting faint rainbows on the cobblestones. I stopped in the center and turned, waiting. Centipede emerged from the shadows of the alley. He was tall, over 6 feet, his insectoid features blending disturbingly well with his human frame. I didn't know if it was rude, but it made me think of Overhaul's pet projects. His appendages moved with an eerie precision, and his voice was polite and calm. "You're quick to notice a tail," he said, his mandibles clicking faintly. "Impressive." Glasslock appeared behind me, stepping from a side street. Her emerald eyes burned into me with a determination, the sharp edges of her gauntlets catching the sunlight. "Smart, but certainly not smart enough," she said. Her tone was confident, smug even. I kept my stance relaxed, tilting my head slightly. "Is there anything I can help you with, heroes?" I was glad for my mask still being on. Glasslock narrowed her eyes. "We are just looking for suspicious individuals. Certain mishaps have been happening in or around the city for a while now." She was so straightforward, no nonsense, a hammer looking for a nail. She reminded me of Bakugu and his personality. The smirk that was bubbling up in me was quashed. "Perhaps you'd like a moment to explain yourself." I cut Centipede off. "I'm with the shy Hisaiki." There was a short pause. "I just think that you should know that we are taking residence here." The air around them shivered. Glasslock seemed stumped. Were they searching for him? Well, let's progress. Also, I slipped my hands into my pockets. "If I were you, I'd rethink the strategy. 2 on 1 isn't great odds for you." Glasslock scoffed. "Cocky, let's see how long that lasts." Her gauntlets shimmered, and suddenly, shards of glass erupted from a nearby window, spinning toward me like a swarm of angry wasps. I sidestepped, letting them slam into the ground. They scattered and some reformed, floating in the air like a deadly halo. "Ah, so she doesn't create them. Just controls the nearby substance." Centipede rushed forward, his limbs stretching unnaturally as he aimed to pin me. I moved faster, ducking under his strike and sliding back into the plaza's open space. "You guys seem curious." I taunted. Glasslock didn't wait. She flung her arms forward, and the floating shards shot towards me in a quicker pace than her initial attack. One caught my sleeve, ripping a clean line in the fabric. She was skilled, but impatient. Centipede closed in again, his limbs snapped forward like WHPS. I dodged, stepping into the space and driving an elbow into his chest. He staggered back but recovered quickly, his mandibles clicking in frustration. Glasslock pressed the attack, leaping into the air and sending waves of glass shards crash down. I raised my hand, and with a sharp flick, a sheet of hardened paper unfolded. The shards shattered harmlessly against it, raining down around me. "Are you holding back?" "On us, heroes?" Centipede asked, his voice steady. "Why?" "Well, that's because this wasn't my mission." Centipede slashed down towards me with a long centipede that was wrapped around his neck. I ducked and slid across the plaza's smooth surface. Glasslock closed in on me from above, shards of glass swirling like a storm at her command. Her movements were precise but lacked the subtlety of Centipede strikes. She threw her arms forward, and the shards shot toward me in a chaotic spiral. This time I didn't block. I twisted and dodged, letting the glass crash into the ground and walls behind me. The alley was confined, I needed more space. With a burst of speed, I vaulted onto a nearby balcony, then onto a rooftop. The tiles crunched under my feet as I raced across, leaping to another building. The open air gave me room to maneuver, but I wasn't alone for long. Glasslock followed, her shards propelling her telekinetically. She landed ahead of me, her emerald eyes gleaming with determination. Centipeder wasn't too far behind, scaling the building with ease. "You won't get away, I've got eyes on you." Who said I was trying to run? With a snap of my fingers, papers coiled around my arm and unfolded in a fluid motion. Strips darted toward the rooftop vents and railings, wrapping them and pulling tight. In seconds, I had turned the rooftop into the battlefield. Centipeder moved first, his limbs stretching toward me like a barrage of spears. I countered with a WHP of paper, sharp and fast, slicing through one of his appendages. He recoiled slightly, but his movements didn't falter. Glasslock used the distraction to attack from the side, sending a spray of glass toward my exposed flank. I pivoted, using the paper strips to pull a vent closer into the line of fire. The shards embedded themselves in metal, and I used the same strip to swing the vent toward her like a battering ram. She dodged, but it threw her off balance. "You're quick," I said, stepping closer to them both, "but it feels like you're trying to outshine your senior." "Phew," she spat out. "Don't let the outlaw get in your head, Glasslock." I stopped moving, which brought them to a halt. "I want to know why you guys knew where to find me." Sure, I was following Glasslock, but I wasn't following for long before I was already being trailed. Was there a third nearby? They both wore earpieces, so there was a chance that someone else was watching and directing them. There isn't much to be heard from Night Eye. He was too secretive. I didn't know how extensive his network was. He wasn't like most of Endeavor's sidekicks who could work well but didn't shy away from the internet in any way. "You both are subordinates of Night Eye, correct?" They didn't answer. It was really hard to read the face of a centipede, and Glasslock had been doing a good job at hiding her thoughts with a stern and angry-looking face. "Night Eye is quite the secretive hero. You guys both seemed like you were searching for something me. When you spotted me, your movements changed and went on trying to ambush. But what could he be looking for from me?" My face hadn't been exposed. I didn't think so anyway. If so, then that opened the door to more, like a missing report being filed out for me. Glasslock's eyes flickered toward Centipeder's, but he didn't respond. "Fine, keep your secrets," I said, a folded envelope formed in my hand. "But I have something that might interest him." I tossed it toward Centipeder. "That's for Night Eye's eyes only," I said. I didn't expect them to actually wait. Centipeder ripped it open and pulled out the sheet. Glasslock looked as if she lost interest in me and flew over to peek into it. "It's a map," she blurted out. "To where?" "A little operation I stumbled on in the future," I said with a shrug. "Let's just say it involves some unsavory characters that might be worth your time." She looked at the back and was trying to pull the paper apart. It was too thick to be only one page. Centipeder understood that it was my doing and let it be. Being part of the Yakuza, especially the Shy Hisaiki, is major news. They were involved in something only a day ago. But there was no news of you. We know all of the 8 Precept members already though. "So, who are you?" he asked me that in a long drawn-out tone. I thought on it for a second. It would be fine for them to know of a new member working with Overhaul. But my quirk is still very unique. If it got out, and in this situation, would my sister come searching? Would she bring in more heroes? That would only give me less time to figure out a plan to get Eri out of Overhaul's clutches. I smiled behind the mask. I don't mind the time crunch. I can work around it. I'll dupe the Shy Hisaiki, the heroes, police, and anyone that gets in my way. In the end, I just want to completely demolish anything to do with the Eden Project. Soryu. My name is Soryu. With that, I leaped, letting the wind carry me to the next rooftop. By the time they reached the edge, I was already gone, and the papers completely unfolded to reveal the documented information that I had collected before even meeting Overhaul. Information about Trigger, Delirium, and the Serum X, which they wouldn't know is just Ares' blood, to create quirk-destroying bullets. that will keep them occupied, and then eventually make them want to strike quickly to stop him. 1 week. That was how long I would give myself to get everything done and get out. I lingered outside Aries' room for longer than necessary. The room was bugged with sound devices and even extra cameras that were hidden. I was sure they weren't there previously. Overhaul still probably didn't fully trust me, which made sense. They were subtly hidden, but I noticed them all when I stepped in. 5 microphones the size of a beetle and 3 cameras only slightly bigger, hidden in things like books, untouched fluffy toy bears, and the floral decorations. Every sound, every breath was recorded. Aerie looked up at me briefly, her crimson eyes creeping from beneath her uneven bangs before darting back to her hands. She didn't show the same fear to me when I entered as she did whenever Overhaul was near. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, her tiny frame swallowed by a new white gown which still shined in color and lacked any stain, but for how long I wonder. "How are you enjoying the new room?" I stepped in closer, trying to sound comforting. She glanced up but didn't answer. Her silence wasn't new, it was probably learned in the harshest of ways. Her arms were exposed, there were scars, raised ridges, pockmarks, and lines that told stories I didn't want to envision. Overhaul was a monster. "Want to see something?" In my hand, paper formed and took shape as a tiny paper crane. It fluttered to life, and its wings beat softly as it hovered in the air. Aries' eyes followed the movement, curiosity flickering for the briefest moment. The crane landed on her knee, tilting its head as if it could sense her hesitation. Slowly she reached out, her fingers brushing against the paper's edge. "You like it?" She nodded faintly, which I was thankful for since her expression hadn't changed, just less wariness. "Good," I said. "Hang on to it." If I was her, which I technically was, just under more humane circumstances, trust is something I wouldn't be giving out so easily. So I couldn't fault her for still being apprehensive. After I free her, hopefully Overhaul won't be a problem anymore. Then she can be sent off to a family that will actually care for her and begin to live a normal life. Her quirk, Overhaul had explained it. It was called Rewind, and it only worked on the living, so I could already guess the complications that would come with it. I stood and turned my back to her as she was still looking over the paper construct. Just before I reached the door, I caught a whispering, almost inaudible, "Thank you." In the quiet light of his office, Sir Night-Eye pored over the documents that were brought back by 2 of his agency members. They explained how they got them from a new member of the Shy Hisaki. Honestly though, he already knew. His quirk was foresight. So Night-Eye decided to use it on one of the 2 he was planning on sending to survey the area. Centipeder. Reason being, he had noticed Overhaul had moved his operations and wanted to be on top of things. He had been investigating Overhaul and had a bad premonition about him, so wanted to make sure he could be 1 step ahead. Night-Eye had also gathered data on the illegal substance known as Trigger that he had been selling. He doesn't know the type of strain he is putting out on the streets, but he does know that it is supposedly very addictive. Well, he didn't know until today. In the future he's seen with Centipeder, he knew that this Soryu was the one who would give him a hand on putting more pieces to the puzzle that was Overhaul's operation. He didn't know why he did, he just guessed that the new member was some morally ambiguous person that got too far ahead of himself. A rogue that shouldn't be trusted. The documents he had provided were detailed, as if they were stolen from the base of operations itself. But they were penned instead of typed out on a computer. The mention of Trigger being mixed with another drag got his attention. But what held his attention was what came next. A Serum X. Sir Night-Eye tapped his fingers across the words, "Quirk erasing bullet, the idea, the implications." It wasn't just a theoretical danger, it was something that could turn into an existential threat to hero society. If these bullets could be mass-produced, it was very chilling. Enough so that Night-Eye even thought of his former partner. Could this be how? He remembers the night he decided to leave All Might. And the bone-chilling images of his death is what makes him ignore the thoughts of reaching out to him about this issue. "I can handle it." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled his chin. Soryu's motives were an enigma. Was he an ally or an opportunist? A rogue vigilante, or someone planted by another faction? Night-Eye ruled out the latter since his methods were too unorthodox, his movements too independent. Still, the information was too valuable to dismiss. Night Eye's sharp gaze swept the papers again, memorizing the patterns. A knock on his door broke his concentration. "Come in," he said without looking up. Mirio Togata, a third-year UA high student he had been mentoring as an intern, stepped in. "We're ready, sir." Mirio was an exemplar student. He could pick up on things quickly, he worked hard, he had the charisma of a first-class hero, and he was witty. Or at least tried to be. Overall, in Night Eye's eyes, Mirio Togata, otherwise known as Lemillion, was one of the only people he could call fit to lead Japan's next generation. A ray of sunshine to take over All Might's giant mantle. A shame my previous mentor couldn't see it. "Good," Night Eye replied, rising from his chair. He carried the documents into the main room, where his small but trusted team gathered. Bubble Girl and Centipede on one side of the table, while Glasslock stood near the window with her arms crossed. "This is everything Soryu provided," Night Eye began, laying out the papers on a table. "We're dealing with the Shy Hisaiki, led by Overhaul. We have known of his illegal dealings of Trigger, but there has never been any substantial proof." Night Eye pointed over to the documents. "But that has changed. We just need to pick up one of his dealers and have probable cause to bring him in and question him. If things go right, he will be of our streets, but we need to handle it with care." "Don't you think this all dropped on us too conveniently?" Mirio asked. His tone was curious. Night Eye nodded, his hand resting on the edge of the table. "Precisely, while this information is invaluable, it also reeks of intent. Soryu wants us to act, but we don't know why." Bubble Girl frowned, her arms crossed. "If it's a trap, why risk giving us information this sensitive? It's not just bait, it's detailed enough to dismantle half of Overhaul's network if this checks out. Unless he wants to cripple Overhaul for another agenda." Centipede interjected. His voice was low and vibrating throughout the whole room. "This Soryu may have no intention of helping us beyond serving his purpose." Glasslock then spoke from where she stood, slowly walking in with the rest of the people at the table. "Maybe he's just playing hero in his own way. Like those freaky underground heroes, and just doesn't want to dirty his own hands too much." Night Eye took in everything his team was saying before he thought to give his own thoughts. "I don't think that. Soryu, from the descriptions you two have provided and more, seems calculated. He wouldn't be the type of person to thrive off of recklessness." "Then what's the play?" Mirio asked. His usual exuberance was tempered, his focus sharpened by the gravity of the situation. "Do we follow the leads or hold back?" "We follow," Night Eye announced. There were two main locations he mapped out, a warehouse and a bar. "You guys will move in twos. If you meet him again, try and get a motive or at least be a good judge of character. Of course, if he is acting in ways intolerable. I'm leaving a rest up to you." Centipede didn't look happy, but it was hard to tell when one couldn't read his face. Night Eye just assumed so because of the air around him. "What's wrong?" he asked. The group turned to look at their peer. "I just think that the kid is using us and it could all lead to our downfall. If we want to have a chance with this, we should fight fire with fire. We should expose that we received the information, causing him to start moving more erratically, like he's doing with us." "No." Night Eye couldn't even shut the thought down. A part of him wanted to, and another understood where Centipede was coming from and agreed, but Mirio had harshly butt in. "We're heroes. We should do the best we can to help everyone we can. We still don't know if he's a victim and needs our help. So we shouldn't rush in and do something like that." Another shining example of why Night Eye has full faith in Mirio to become a bright ray of positive light in the future. Sometimes a little too idealistic, but that confidence to call your seniors out was good to help him and the rest see the current situation for what it was. A blurry mess that only got a little less dim. Night Eye smiled. "I envision only a bright future for us." The halls in the compound were steeped in silence. The only sound was the buzz of the overhead lights. I moved with a silent gait, to avoid detection. The cameras tracked their predictable paths and I waited. Patiently for my moment. My quirk, Paper Master, I didn't know exactly what category it fell under. I think it was a mission, but categories didn't really matter. But one little thing I learned when I got used to sneaking around places was to flatten. My body collapsed, taking a two-dimensional form, like actual paper. The world felt strange in this state, muted and warped. I lost that normal peripheral sight that everyone has and was more tunnel-visioned. But it was a small price to pay. I clung to the walls, evading the camera's line of sight. Reforming only when I was sure there were none as I got closer to my destination. Ahead, 2 guards stood casually at the intersection of the corridor. Overhaul hired normal men through a security agency. They had nothing to do with his actual business. I could respect their commitment. They would probably search for the nearest exit if they knew what he was actually doing. Paper cranes glided silently down the hall, catching the faint light as it fluttered. One of the guards noticed it first, tapping his partner and pointing. "What is that?" "Dunno. Maybe he has a kid." He would have said so, idiot. Curiosity won over caution and they followed the crane as it drifted around the corner. Once they were out of sight, I moved again, darted towards the door and turning 2D again to slip under the small gap between the door and the floor. And I was in. I was in Overhaul's private office, one of them anyway. But this one was important. It was important because it held his private computer. Like every other room in the compound, this one was as sterile and as suffocating as the man himself. Overhaul's desk stood at the center of the room, in front of a mini bookshelf. It looked like it was a principal's office. Every item on the desk was in perfect symmetry. Even his keyboard looked like it was untouched, each key polished and pristine. The smell of cleaning agents wafted around the area. He must have been here recently. I grabbed a pair of gloves from my pocket, second skin gloves. They were designed to practically be unnoticeable, and due to its clear tones, they really did seem invisible. I sat down with a piece of paper between me and the seat. I booted up the computer and let my hands fly across the keyboard. Overhaul's digital security wasn't bad, but it wasn't good enough to stop me. Layer after layer of encryption fell away, revealing a treasure trove of files. I scanned the screen, bypassing financial records and supply logs until one folder caught my attention. Conference records. Inside were audio files, each labeled with dates and times. I clicked on the most recent one, plugging in an earpiece just in case the audio could be overheard. Overhaul's voice filtered through. "We're on schedule. The prototypes have shown promise," he said. A second voice responded, scrambled and distorted. Something about his cadence felt oddly reminiscent, geeky and overly obsessed, but this person was still keeping airs about them, trying to sound demanding and tough. "Good, that quirk of yours sure works wonders. How's the girl?" The conversation made me think that Overhaul was not the big bad boss that we all assumed. He was giving a report about his workings that have been going on. He is talking about Aerie and the quirk erasing bullets he is making. "She's still with us. We unfortunately had to move, but I'm sure your MC already knows about that." So Overhaul wasn't even speaking to the big boss, just some lackey. I read the file names and even looked at how he saved the conversations. He was talking to someone labeled Doctor. I didn't have a clue who that may be. But then again, why record these conversations? The questions gnawed at me. Was it insurance? It would make some kind of sense. Overhaul trusted no one, not his men or supposed allies. But that would mean there could be more. Another file drew my eye. Its title was Project Oversight. Opening it revealed a few scattered notes and a single reference to an academic facility. I frowned. The name of the school was Aldra Junior High. Bakugu and Midoriya went there. I never got to go because of my bad behavior. I was banned from most schools in the district. But even then, I was already sent off to the Eden Project. Shaking my head, my dreads danced along with the movements. I copied everything down on my phone. The chair creaked softly as I leaned back, staring at the screen. Overhaul made a mention of the scrambled voices and someone powerful enough to control Overhaul. Before my mind could wander, footsteps echoed outside the door. Then Overhaul's voice came next. The computer was already off, but since it was recently on, he would probably notice the signs. Every other sign to show I was here was erased. I flattened myself into a sheet of paper and slid under the desk as the door opened. Even if he does notice, I doubt he would confront just me. There's no solid proof that anyone was here. I also thought that even a man as controlled as him would think that he made a mistake, just this once. He muttered something unintelligible, I created a small paper ant to watch his movements. Once it relayed that he was turned away, I slid from under the desk in my 2D form, making no sound, and then slid under the door again as he turned towards his computer. The guards were no longer where they were stationed. I reformed as I made it a solid distance away from the door. My breathing was steady. After some more time I made it back to the underground space and ended up in my little abode, acting completely normal. Nothing about me would give away that I had just broke into my employer's private room and tampered with important information. The silence in the room was deafening. Aries' small hands gripped the edges of her blanket, pulling it tighter around her as she stared at the empty floor. Every day was a reminder of the same nightmare she couldn't escape. Her thoughts were heavy, swirling like a storm. Memories she didn't want to recall surfaced unbidden. Her mother's back as she walked away from her, the faint echo of her father's laughter. Before she had erased it forever. The scars that laced her small body, mounds of flesh where needles and scalpels had pulled pieces of her apart, stung even though they had long since healed. She had tried to run before, twice, but both times had only ended in pain, for both her and others. Each failure tainted her soul, tainted her body. It was like a reminder that she was nothing more than a curse. Her gaze drifted down to her lap, where her fingers clenched the blanket tightly. What was the point of wishing? What was the point of dreaming? No one had ever helped her, not truly. No one had ever stayed. She was alone and she deserved it. A soft knock on her door startled her. Usually people would just come in. Aerie blinked and quickly smoother over her expression, expecting overhaul. She turned her head as the door creaked open, revealing the quiet figure of her guard. He stepped inside without a word, and without his mask, again. He wasn't very tall, at least not compared to others on the compound. His skin was darker than what she was used to, but that was probably because she hasn't spent any time outside. It was warm and rich, a soft brown. It catches light in a way that makes him seem comforting and approachable. His eyes were a soft beige brown that reminded her of caramel. To Aerie, her guard's hair looked strange too. It dangled in a way that she hadn't seen in any of her other guards before. Like a collection of braided vines, well-maintained, as though each strand had been carefully twisted and shaped. Silver studs glinted in both his ears, catching the light whenever he moved. There was something about the way he moved as well, a quiet confidence that she also sees in Overhaul. He didn't speak much. He stepped in, closing the door behind him. Aerie watched him cautiously, her red eyes meeting his for a brief moment before she looked away. He wasn't like the others in the compound. He wasn't cruel. He was more gentle. She didn't know his name. To her, he was just the guard. He glanced over at her briefly before his eyes settled on the bookshelf in the corner. Without a word he strode over and scanned the spines. His fingers paused on one. Aerie couldn't read, so she didn't know the title. But it was a book with a faded red cover. Pulling it out, he turned it over, studying it before saying, "This one." Aerie tilted her head, unsure of what he meant. He didn't wait for a response. Instead he walked over to the small chair by her bed and sat down, flipping it open to the first page. His voice was steady and low as he read it. Once upon a time, there was a child found in a giant peach. Aerie's eyes widened a little, the start of the story pulling her attention fully away from her own swirling thoughts. She didn't understand it at all, but she understood enough of the beginning. The tale of Momotaro, the boy who had come from a peach, abandoned by no one but his destiny to conquer demons. The words flowed from her guard's lips as he continued, recounting the adventures of Momotaro, who had been raised by elderly parents and gone on to seek vengeance for those wronged by demons. With a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant at his side. He traveled to face those demons, proving that the most unlikely of heroes could change the world. Aerie sat still, watching him intently as he read. She didn't know why, but there was something calming about his voice. Something about it made her feel like she could breathe again. Like there was something more than just the CYCL of fear and pain. She had never had someone read to her before, not like this. Not since her mother. A tear threatened to spill, but she quickly blinked it away. She hadn't even realized how much she had missed something as simple as experiencing this, how long she had longed for the sound of a voice that wasn't threatening. something that seemed like a far-off reality. Momotaro had been abandoned too, and yet he found strength. Even when the world was against him, he had allies and he had a purpose. She didn't know why, but it made her heart ache. She wished that she was him, that she was like him and could find that strength. When the story came to an end, with Momotaro returning victorious and celebrated as a hero, the room was quiet again. Her guard was closed the book gently, and his eyes fell on her. "Did you like it?" he asked, his tone softer now. Eri swallowed, her voice barely a whisper, and she kept her head down. "I don't know. It's strange." He nodded, understanding. "That's okay, you don't need to understand it all right away. The important part is he found his strength no matter how impossible it seemed." She didn't say anything for a long time. The story seemed to open an unknown chamber in her heart. She didn't know what it meant for her, if it meant anything at all. She only knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of something inside her. The guard stood up, placing the book back on the shelf. He didn't say anything else, he just gave one last glance before leaving the room. The door clicked shut behind him, and Eri was left alone again. But this time the silence felt different. It wasn't as heavy. There was a weight to it, but it wasn't crushing. It was lighter. And for the first time, Eri allowed herself to think that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Eri allowed herself to hope. I was on a new mission with new people. I could probably fake a happy reaction right now. Honestly, I did expect a lot of moving around, but that's every day of the week so far. Only the third day in, but I still needed to find a way to meet up with the Night Eye Agency before they finished scoping out all the places I mapped out. The truck we were in rumbled along a worn path, a jagged stretch of road that wound beneath the rusted bridge, the creek's murmur faint in the distance. Inside, the smell of old blood, metal, and the faint tang of chemicals mixed with the stifling in the air. I was sat at the back, legs pressed against the hard, cramped walls of the truck. The cargo was packed tight, a grim collection of bodies, both dead and alive. 3 of them were dead. Human bodies, pale and stiff, faces slack and frozen in a final moment of agony. Their forms were folded in an uncomfortable arrangement, limbs twisted as though in an attempt to shield themselves from the cruelty of death. Their clothes were tattered, evidence of some violence before they met their final end. I mentally catalogued their features. Scarred foreheads, skin that had clearly seen many years of abuse, empty eyes. The other 3 were different. Even in the stillness, they felt alive. Or at least they somewhat were. They were part of Overhaul's creation of merged animals and humans. These ones had no limbs. He said it was to make space for the ride. Their cages were still small, barely large enough for their twisted bodies. I could hear the shallow breaths. Mimic was sat across from me, in a small form that I was told was just his disguise. Wrapped in a black cloak with 2 stocky legs and a plague mask that had a pointy nose. I think he was one of the more annoying members of this group I had run into. Similar to Rappa, he had an irritating confidence about him. But not so similar, he was always quick with a sharp word or cruel joke. And he was overly dedicated to Overhaul's ambitions. I just didn't know if he was someone to watch out for. Which reminded me of the fact I hadn't seen Shin Nemoto in a few days now. Yuhojo, the driver, was less overtly strange, more straightforward. His face was hardened with years of rough labor, the kind that made people forget about the soft-spoken demeanor. He was bald, tall and muscular with shadowed eyes. The truck finally came to a stop under a desolate bridge, the creek gurgling beneath. Mimic didn't wait for anything. He opened the back of the truck with a single motion, his gaze flickering towards the bodies and me. "Get to it, unload the corpses. I'll keep a lookout." I nodded without a word, stepping into the wet grass as I began to drag the bodies out of the truck. The corpses were first. Paper flowed from me, wrapped themselves like a thin veil around the corpses, and then I just adjusted them and controlled them to move out of the truck. I did something similar with the other bodies. I dragged them out with huge hand structures I created hanging above me. The other 2 watched as I caught up to them. As I got closer, I noticed a shadow form in a puddle in front of them. A strange figure emerged from it, standing, or should I say floating in a swirling motion. dark mist emanating from them. I knew him from the news reports on the attacks on UA. A misty warp gate had helped the villains break in. With how rare quirks like that were, this must be him. Kurogyri. He blended into the surroundings with an eerie calm. Mimic, it is nice to see you again, he said with a pointed direction. Save it, just give us our load and we'll give you yours. Mimic was unnecessarily loud sometimes, and this was one of them. It was something that annoyed me about people when I was younger. Hojo turned his back to the scene, already heading back to the truck. He was fine with knowing things were going as they should have. I remained focused on the task at hand, using my paper to lift all 6 bodies in the direction of the warp gate user. But when 2 more people, alive teenagers, arrived from the warp gate, I was slightly stunned. My chest tightened. They were young, my age mates probably. The boy had messy brown hair and a nervous look to his face. And the other was a girl with a tangled mess of black hair and a frightened expression with dirt on her face. Their hands and legs were both bound. That's all we get? Mimic asked with a perky, accusatory tone. That's all you need, Overhaul will know how to accommodate them. Mimic then signaled for me to pick them up and drop them in the truck. I stuttered for a moment. I think I know them. From elementary school before I got expelled. The boy, his extremely round face due to his quirk, and soft eyes that looked as if they were about to cry all the time, I could remember him. The girl too. There were marks around her eyes where she was supposed to be wearing glasses. I can remember she had a minor telekinesis quirk, really weak though. How are they here? Take care of their journey, will you? Kurogyri mentioned, breaking me out of my thoughts before disappearing. Damn it, rookie. Mimic screamed in my ear as he jumped on my shoulder. You fucking embarrassed me. Follow my DMN orders and pick him up and put them in the truck. I forgot. Plus, it's hard to take someone that size seriously when they try to act like a superior. As the 2 were being lifted to the truck like pieces of meat, I began to ponder on the reason for them specifically being here, captured and bound and basically trafficked. My mind wandered and came to a realization: Project Oversight. It was on Overhaul's computer. It had to do with a school named Aldra. Those 2 probably made the transition to the school, so what then? That doesn't explain why they were kidnapped. But it gave me something to work with, even if it wasn't much. They clearly weren't taken because of their quirks, maybe just more bodies for Overhaul to experiment with. Now if that is the case, should I save them? The smell in this place was the first thing that'll hit you if you walk in. Metallic and sharp from blood, mixed with the musty, tangy smell of sweat and damp earth as well as urine. It should be expected in an illegal dog racing circuit. People lined the railings of the track, leaning too far over, shouting at the animals like their lives depended on the outcome of the grim sport. Beneath the rackets I could hear the dogs, snarling, yelling and breathing. If you listened too long you would start to feel sick. I kept my mask on, this time only covering the lower part of my face snugly. The fewer eyes on me the better. My back was pressed upon a grimy support beam as I scanned the crowd. It didn't take long to find him, Mirio Togata. As a UA student he was kind of famous. As the hero Lemillion, many people believed he would be the next All Might. The top rookie. Even in this grimy atmosphere and him wearing dark colors, he still stood out. His posture was casual but you could tell he was not used to this. He wasn't even surveying his surroundings. With every second he spent looking at the line-up, it looked like he was just an inch away from jumping in and putting a stop to it. I pushed myself off the beam, weaving through the crowd to close the distance between us. Mirio caught sight of me, finally, and moved as well, until we had reached a corner less populated by the people in the room. His eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. He was more cautious now, more deliberate. A charming spot you found, huh? He said. It's neutral ground. Overhaul has no business here. I replied to his natural confidence with my even tone. No one here cares what we're talking about as long as we stay out of the way. His eyes scanned mine, searching for something. Sure, I just hope this doesn't fall back on us and it is actually out of the goodness of your heart. I tilted my head, not sure if there was a message I was missing. I ignored it and stated my pros. Overhaul has 2 high schoolers. He just bought them off someone earlier tonight. Alive for now. If you want them to stay that way, you go to the location that I tell you in 2 hours. I was really going to be working on overtime here. The group I was with had to make a stop. We had made sure Overhaul knew we made the stop. Mimic kept the two in question sedated and tied in the back of the truck while we rested and waited for the tank to cool down and fill up. Overhaul didn't want us using any of his newer vehicles in case they'd be damaged. Hold on, that easy? You hand the intel and I'm supposed to just believe you don't have some ulterior motive? Believe what you want, but in 2 hours' time the window of opportunity will be open. If you miss it, I won't be doing any more to free them. I glanced towards the track, watching the dogs tear down the dirt path, their bodies taut with desperation. Mirio crossed his arms. Why are you doing this then? You're deep enough with the Yakuza to know that if they go down, so do you. Honestly, I never thought about that, and I didn't care to. You don't need some morality lecture. Let me give you a rundown on Overhaul's quirk. With a touch he can disassemble anything he touches, as well as reassemble it in any configuration he desires, basically having full control over matter. Mirio gained a thoughtful expression. He really should have worn a mask. He's experimenting, I continued, merging humans with animals, among other things. Those two high schoolers will be next in line. The words hung in the air between us. Mirio didn't respond right away, and when he did, his voice was quieter and sharper. You're a kid. And so, I wanted to spit out. But I stopped myself since I didn't want to expose any more of myself. This man in front of me was in the same year and school as my sister. No clue if they're in the same class though. Mirio pressed on and stepped closer, looking into my eyes. You're a kid. Probably not much older than me, but judging by how small you are, you're probably younger. That felt more like a jab than an assessment. That you're playing with people that would kill you without blinking. Don't you get that? I know exactly what I'm doing, and if you're not ready with your team of heroes, then their blood is on your hands. Do you understand that? I spoke slowly to properly get the message across. Then an anger flashed across his face. It was brief but unmistakable. You don't owe them your life. You don't owe anyone your life. You know that, right? He was trying to be thoughtful, but to me it came off as condescending. We could help you. I don't need any help. I can help myself. Save the hero's speech. Before he could respond, a guttural growl cut through the air, followed by a sharp yelp. The crowd erupted, surging toward the railing. The dogs in the pit had turned on each other. One had started biting and the bodies of more collided. Shouts of panic and excitement blended into a deafening roar as the spectators jostled for a better view or backed away entirely. Mirio's head snapped toward the commotion, and his voice was steady and commanding. Bubble girl now. A moment later, a girl colored blue appeared. Her bright shade was a sharp contrast to the shadows of the venue. What the hell is going on? She asked. Her tone was sharp but not in panic. Separate the dogs from the crowd, Mirio yelled, already moving forward toward the pit. Bubble Girl activated her quirk, forming bubbles that floated down to create barriers between the dogs and people. She worked quickly. As she moved, her foot got caught in something and she stumbled. Looking down, she was surprised to see 3 men knocked out and wrapped up tightly in thin white paper. Lemillion. She called out urgently. I think we got something here. I watched from the shadows as they both inspected the men. Mirio approached, quickly connecting the dots as he told Bubble Girl. They are probably the organizers of this event. Mirio's gaze swept the room in search for me. But I was already gone, flying high back to where I left my initial group. The smell of gas and rust filled the truck's cabin. The sound of the engine cut through the silence. I sat in the corner of the cargo hold, my mask still covering the lower parts of my face. Mimic floated nearby, his small figure darting between seats and walls, muttering to himself as he fixed his eyes on me. You're really quiet, he finally said. Where were you earlier? Sleeping. Really, 'cause I knocked really loud and I didn't even hear a stir. I shrugged and kept my tone light and dismissive. I was real tired. You know how exhausting these runs can be. His glare didn't waver. Suspicion of me was still strong from the other members. Yes, sure, deep sleep. He sighed and turned away. Make sure you carry your own. No use in babysitting around here. How ironic. The truck jolted as it hit another bump in the road. Up front, Hojo cursed under his breath, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. How much longer till we're back? Mimic barked. Another hour, maybe less. Hojo replied, his tone clipped. I stayed silent, watching as the landscape had taken on the color of early morning. Mimic got Hojo to sedate the two teens in the back. Their breathing was shallow but steady. It was still a weird revelation that I knew of them, as well as the fact that they may be involved in some rancid experiment by Overhaul and whoever his conspirators are. Pieces of paper were in both of their pockets. It would make what I'm about to do easier and unnoticeable. Mimic wandered back to me in his small form. You seem awfully invested in those kids, he mentioned. What's your deal? No deal, I replied coolly. I turned my head from him and out the window as I started noticing flashing lights. Then came the sirens. The F-dash. Police are here. Hojo announced it. How and why? Mimic turned to me. I couldn't judge what his face was saying because of the mask, but due to his earlier suspicions, I was sure he believed I had something to do with it. I didn't respond. I was concentrating on the paper in the round-faced boy's pocket, and it floated out and out of the truck, following along as a small bird now. The others couldn't see it, but the police may have been able to. Hang on! Hojo yelled. He slammed his foot on the accelerator. The truck roared as it careened down a side path. The tires screeched against the gravel. The cages in the back rattled violently, and I instinctively reached out to steady it. The sirens grew louder. Flashing red and blue lights grew closer. Hojo swore again, yanking the wheel to avoid oncoming obstacles. Thankfully, there weren't many vehicles on the road this early. Mimic, do something. Do what? Mimic snapped, his small body darting around the cabin. I can't stop a whole demon convoy. You're supposed to be the DM and manager. Hojo screamed. Self-imposed manager. I gripped the walls for balance as the truck swayed dangerously. The high schooler's cage was still intact, but it wouldn't be for long. My quirk was ready to act. As the truck rounded a sharp turn, the heroes popped out. A car sped up, pulling alongside us before veering sharply to block our path. Hojo slammed the brakes, and the truck skidded to a violent stop, throwing all of us forward. Perfect. I remained unperturbed. The paper that was following the truck had slit its tires, and another formed in the shape of a knife and cut the cage open. Once the truck had dropped, it was easy to notice that the back tires had gone. And with that, the back of the truck was tilted backwards. The cage dropped and the two victims were on the gravel. You're surrounded. The voice of Centipeder bellowed. Step out the vehicle and surrender. Mimic was the first to react. His form darted towards a light pole and merged. I think that is what happened. So that must be his quirk then. The light pole twisted in shape before smashing atop the vehicle that was following us. Surrounded? We'll see about that. Mimic was back in his cloth-like form. Centipeder approached cautiously. You are only making this harder on yourself. Mimic laughed and it echoed. As Centipeder got closer, the ground beneath him shifted, the metal warping into a slippery surface that threw him off balance. Mimic reappeared, darting at his legs before vanishing again. His movements were taunting. Come on, bug boy, catch me if you can. Mimic jeered. The two teens that were on the gravel had disappeared. They must have been carried to safety already. Meanwhile, in front of me stood Lemillion, whose eyes were focused on me. He done his best to drag me off to a far distance, not too far away from the main battle. He opened up with, "There's still a way out. You're better than this." I hated that when people spoke like that, they most likely had prior knowledge of the person. In all honesty, you can never fairly judge someone. And his profession was one where it was more than necessary. A sharp cry cut the night. Glasslock stumbled out of wreckage, blood seeping from her side where a jagged crystal protruded. Hojo stood over her, his body shimmering with sharp edges of pink that came from his quirk. We have no reason to be surrendering to you heroes. Glasslock managed to deflect a strike, but Hojo's hit still connected. The impact was brutal and it sent her sprawling. Her glass armor shattered and her quirk faltered. Glasslock! Centipeder shouted, abandoning his chase for Mimic to rush by her side. Lemillion was silent, and to hammer in that I did not need his help, I quickly formed a large pair of scissors and kicked upward one side that was powerful enough to cut his hand off. But it phased through, and then he dipped into the ground, vanishing. "Behind you!" Hojo barked. I twisted to the side, avoiding the strike Lemillion was aiming at me. His face shone a different expression now. One of rage. That earlier pleading look had disappeared so easily. And of course it did. It meant nothing. Massive paper, angel-like wings appeared on my back, and I rose to the air, avoiding the barrage of punches Mirio was about to dish out. Two massive paper birds spawned near Hojo and Mimic. Hojo got on top of his and Mimic merged with his. And with that, we flew off into the night. The compound loomed ahead. It felt like the walls were already pressing in on me. Our footsteps echoed off the concrete as we walked through the corridors. Mimic's voice was the first to break the oppressive silence. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" His venomous words were directed at me, snapping like a WP. "Don't think I didn't notice how you were holding back there. Did you even fight that hero, or were you just shining his boots?" I didn't bother looking at him. "If you were paying so much attention, then you could have put in more effort into taking out the bug instead of playing hide and seek." That struck a nerve. "You've got a smart mouth, you're already skating on thin ice. You think Overhaul won't see right through you." I stopped walking, finally turning to face him. My expression was neutral, my voice even. "Maybe if you spent less time pointing fingers and more time putting an actual effort in, we wouldn't have lost the cargo." And I wholeheartedly believe that, although I would have just found another way to release them. From what I learned of Mimic's quirk, he could merge with inanimate objects and take control of them. He could have done so with the truck and got us to safety if he wanted, unless there were restrictions. But that didn't matter. I just needed to play into this role, to fit in. My words were like a trigger. Mimic lunged forward, his body expanded wide enough to engulf me. "You little..." "Enough!" Hojo's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stepped between us, his imposing figure casting a long shadow on the wall. "Save your tantrums for later, we've got bigger problems to deal with." Mimic hissed but backed off, his form shrinking slightly. I met Hojo's gaze briefly, and his eyes told me everything. "Keep your mouth shut in front of the boss." He was on the fence on whether or not he should believe me or so. He was more like Rappa. Simple, well, Rappa was really simple actually. I could outright tell him my plans, then come up with some simple lie to break him out of the thought that I could be a traitor. We finally entered Overhaul's office. "You're late." His tone was sharp from behind the face mask. It was enough to make Mimic flinch. And empty-handed. Hojo stepped forward and done most of the talking for us. We were intercepted by heroes. We were able to deliver from our end, but we lost the cargo. Overhaul's eyes narrowed, his hands tightened before he placed them in front of him in a calming effort. "Heroes? What tipped them off?" His voice dripped with disdain. Mimic, the little critter, wasted no time. He pointed a gnarled appendage at me. It was him. "I've been saying it from the start, this Soryu Bestiardi's not loyal." I raised an eyebrow. "Blaming me for your own incompetence? Bold strategy." "Enough." Overhaul's voice thundered through the room, and the tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. He stood slowly, his presence filling the space. "I don't care who's to blame. What I care about are results. Right now all I see are excuses." His gaze locked on me though. Cold and calculating. "Kobe." I met his stare unflinchingly. "You've been useful before," he continued. His voice was low but carrying the weight of a threat. "But loyalty is like a blade. It dulls over time if not sharpened. I don't tolerate dull blades." I gave a small nod, choosing silence over defiance. He gestured for us to leave. Mimic edged closer and jumped on his desk though. "Also guys, remember." Overhaul disrupted. "Failure is never acceptable." Back in my quarters, I closed the door and let out a slow breath before laying still on my bed. I checked the place every night to see if it was bugged. It wasn't, which made for what I planned next more calming and even somewhat exciting. Sitting cross-legged on my bed, my hand lifted and paper formed and scrunched up to look like a certain figure, Mimic. "Let's see what you're up to with the boss now." When Mimic decided to merge with the bird I used to allow for our escape from the scene, I kept a small piece of it on him from the moment we landed. I made sure to land in the dark shade of trees. So a piece of my paper stuck to him and was now acting like a listening device. The first thing I heard was, "He's a loose cannon," Mimic spat out, referring to me with a barely restrained malice. "The way he carries himself? Like he's untouchable. You seen in right now, boss. I believe he handed those kids to the heroes. If it weren't for me, we would all have been caught." Overhaul remained silent at Mimic's bold-faced lie. His gloves were tapping the surface, and he didn't interrupt Mimic's tantrum, but the air grew heavier the longer it went on. "And what's worse?" Mimic pressed on, leaning forward as if to drive the point home. "He's got no respect. No fear. You think he's loyal? I'd bet my life he's playing both sides." Overhaul finally looked up, his gaze sharp. "Your life? That's a steep wager, Mimic," he said with a soft danger to his tone. "Anyway, the reason I included him to the team even though he lacked that fear and respect is the same reason I took on Toya. They've both got no goals, no regard for their lives. It's what makes them good tools." Mimic flinched, pulling back slightly but refusing to back down entirely. "I'm telling you, that doesn't matter. He's a risk to this family." There was a long pause. Overhaul stood, his movements slow and deliberate as he adjusted his gloves. "Do you know what separates someone who's valuable from someone that's expendable?" Mimic hesitated, unsure if whether the question was rhetorical or not. "Loyalty," he answered tentatively. "No." Overhaul stepped closer, his presence was suffocating. "Results. Ever since he has been here, there have been rumors of people staying away, equating the kid to a boogeyman that they don't want to mess with. The family's name has risen again, if only slightly. He has brought us results." He gestured vaguely at Mimic. "You, on the other hand, have been whining and beaching about him. Since he's been here, and this is your first time meeting the punk." Mimic bristled, his form flickering erratically. "Boss, Overhaul raised his hand, silencing him. "I have someone in the police force. He'll comb through every frame of the footage from tonight that was recorded from the police dashcams. If there's a traitor in our ranks, I'll find them." His voice remained sharp, cutting through the air like a scalpel. "Until then, just do as I ask." Mimic recoiled and muttered, "Understood." The paper tagging him disintegrated to nothing. The conversation had gone more or less how I expected, other than the final pieces of it. About his version of useful and expendable tools, and most importantly, the police cameras. I could be screwed here. Sure, the people in the car wouldn't have noticed my acts because of the intensity of the situation, but that didn't mean the cameras would have missed it. I laid down in bed staring at the ceiling and weighing my options. There would be a couple hours or maybe a full day or two before he got this supposed police officer to get him all the details. I still had the advantage for now. But the cracks were starting to show. The sound of the machines in the hospital room filled the silence of the room. St. Peter stood at the foot of the bed where an unconscious Glasslock lay, her face pale against the sterile white of the pillow. Her side was bandaged, but the jagged wound beneath was a grim reminder of how close she had come to death. St. Peter clenched his mandibles, frustration bubbling under his composed exterior. "This isn't right," he muttered. His voice was low, but a bubbling anger radiated from it. "She shouldn't have to pay for someone else's recklessness." Bubble Girl, standing by the window, crossed her arms. Her usual bright demeanor was dimmed, replaced by a sharp edge. "You mean Soryu," she said bluntly, not bothering to hide the bitterness in her tone. "His tip-off put her here. It's like he doesn't even think about the fallout." Centipeder nodded. His gaze never left Glasslock. "He's just a careless brat. We should have put him in cuffs from the moment we seen him." His voice trailed off, his claws tightening around the edge of the bed. "He won't walk away next time." Sir Night-Eye had walked in with Mirio at his back. Mirio's face was downcast. He didn't radiate that same ray of sunshine he usually did. He looked heavily remorseful. Sir Night-Eye kept his appearances up, but it was clear that he was still deeply affected from this. Sir Night-Eye pressed the bridge of his glasses closer to his nose. "I'm glad that you all made it back alive. I just wish the circumstances could be better." It's my fault. Mirio spoke up. He bowed to everyone in the room. I was the one that accepted Soryu's tip-off and dragged everyone into this. I should have contacted Sir first. Don't blame yourself, you made a call and in the end we still rescued 2 civilians. That was true, the 2 in question were in hospital rooms of their own, knocked out with hospital staff attending them and police officers waiting outside to guard as well as take their reports once they wake up. She will pull through. Sir Night Eye said, but blame will not heal her. Nor will it change our current situation. Bubble Girl spoke up with the slightest bit of disrespect pointed to her boss. With all due respect, sir, someone has to take blame for this. And I feel one person deserves it more than Overhaul. Centipeder droned out the conversation, his mind was elsewhere. He looked at Glasslock's face, her expression so peaceful it felt wrong. He couldn't let this stand. Soryu had led them to this. Centipeder wasn't as tolerant as Sir Night Eye and he was fine with that, it got things done the right way. Even if he had to do things a little underhanded, he would do so to restore the team's balance. Centipeder was going to do something that he knows wouldn't be accepted by Night Eye, but as he continued to stare into Glasslock's form he decided he wouldn't need his permission for this. Later as he stepped out of the hospital room to the crisp glow of the sun, his mind was spinning on wheels. He had made a decision and now was off to set it in stone. The coffee shop was alive with chatter, a lively hum of overlapping voices punctuated by the hiss of the espresso machine. The scent of roasted beans hung heavy in the air, mingling with the sugary sweetness of the pastries from the display case. A lively space for unwinding. Centipeder would usually spend some time here, more so in his younger years since this place and the area in general were typically more accepting of mutants like him. He looked scary, he would hear it a lot and it always made him feel lesser than. But he found a comfort here. And not only him, the greedy and ambitious swine always find themselves comfortable in the same spaces not meant for them. And that is what he is looking for now. Centipeder gained a few curious glances as he looked around, he adjusted his tie more so out of habit to fit in more. His scanning of the room stopped when he found the character he was looking for. Kenji Kubo, the journalist with a penchant for stirring up troubling headlines. Kenji's presence was impossible to miss. At the corner, the man held court, his animated gestures carving shapes in the air. His voice was relentless and sharp, in a news anchor way. I'm telling you, the system's rotten top to bottom, he declared, waving a half-empty coffee cup as if it were a gavel. Heroes covering for politicians, politicians covering for villains. Centipeder believed there could be some truth to his odd conspiracies, but that's not what was important now. The small audience around him were nodding and laughed nervously, more drawn in by his charisma than the conspiratorial tirade. When a small and sweet lady in the shop's uniform asked the crowd to disperse for intimidating the customers, Centipeder went on the move. Kenji Kubo? Kenji blinked and stared up at the voice, startled. Then his lips stretched into a grin, a practice ease masking his surprise. Well, if it isn't part of society's finest. To what do I owe the pleasure, Mr. Centipede? His tone was equal parts sarcasm and intrigue. Centipeder ignored the jab, producing a manila envelope from his coat and placing it on the table with a soft thud. He slid it across to Kenji, who raised a brow but didn't immediately reach for it. This is for you, Centipeder said, his voice low. Kenji's grin widened as he picked up the envelope. What's this, a love letter? I get enough of those already. Or is it? He slightly opened it and flicked through the pages, his eyes widening as he scanned through each page. The grin faded, replaced by an intense focus. Kenji let out a low whistle, shaking his head. This is good. Where did you get this? Scratch that, why are you giving this to me? Centipeder's mandibles clicked softly. What matters is that it is real and actionable. Do something meaningful. Kenji leaned back, tapping the edge of the envelope against the table. He was cautious, which didn't seem to match his overall personality in Centipeder's eyes. You're asking me to stick my neck out here. Overhaul's not a small-time crook. He's a monster with deep pockets and deep connections. If I go after him, I'm painting a target on my back. Centipeder crossed his arms, towering over the journalist. You've painted targets before and you've come out unscathed because you're good at what you do. Kenji smirked, though there was a glint of nervousness in his eyes. Flattery will get you nowhere, bug boy. I still need to know what's in it for you. Heroes don't typically hand off intel like this without expecting something big in return from the story. I want to make sure that Overhaul finally gets thrown away in the place he deserves. But I also want you to highlight the new boogeyman he has working for him. Soryu. Centipeder photocopied the documents that he got from Soryu, but he also added in new information all about the paper villain. There were no solid pictures of him, even from security cameras. But the drawings would be enough for people to know. You're serious about this? Fine. I'll bite. But you better hope this pans out, or I'll be writing a very different story with your name at the front and center. Without another word, Centipeder got up and walked out, his long legs carrying him swiftly out of the coffee shop. He heard Kenji's quiet envisioning of how the paper will go as he brought out his laptop to start planning. Front page, he muttered to himself, a grin creeping back onto his face. No bigger. This is Pulitzer material. Article title, Unveiling Overhaul, A Glimpse into the Mob's Horrors. Date, April 4, 2256. By Kenta Kubo, The Hero's Insight. For decades, the underworld has been rife with whispers of powerful figures exploiting humanity's darker impulses. But Overhaul is a chilling embodiment of villainy that we have not seen in many years. Recent leaked information has shattered the veil of secrecy surrounding how he operates, revealing crimes so grotesque they defy comprehension. Human experimentation. Leaked photographs have exposed a grim catalog of Overhaul's experiments. The images are too graphic to reproduce here. Just know they depict grossly merged human beings. Humans fused with other humans. Their limbs unnaturally elongated, faces distorted into grimaces of pain. Animals spliced with humans, creating nightmarish hybrids that are neither fully human nor beast. Merged animals, forming species that are in intense agony. Examples would include a pit bull's body and legs with the head and wings of a crow, or the arms of a bear and the neck of a giraffe, making creatures that look completely new and unfounded on this planet. These experiments are believed to be an exploit of Overhaul's quirk. His quirk, on the other hand, allows him to control matter, giving power to an already dangerous name. Trigger. Yakuza venturing into the drag trade is never going to be surprising. But with Overhaul he deals trigger, and even worse than that, he has created a new strain that keeps people coming back until they eventually die from it. We have found out minor bits of information on how this new strain was made. He laces the quirk-enhancing drag with a substance called delirium. After some research, we have found out that the compound comes from overseas in Brazil. Delirium is a highly addictive compound that intensifies the affects of trigger while creating a dependency that spirals users into continued use. The effects on the body after repeated use lead to a gruesome death caused by the rupture of blood vessels or even the heart. Emergency room cases linked to these symptoms have skyrocketed in recent months, pointing to widespread distribution. The boogeyman, Soryu. There is a new figure enforcing Overhaul's will, and he goes by Soryu. This figure has reportedly orchestrated multiple kidnappings for the mob boss. Specifics of him remain unknown, but his quirk is described to be related to wielding paper constructs. He is said to be likened to a living storm. Soryu's name is quickly making its way across the underworld. Call for justice. The revelations have ignited public outrage. Citizens demand immediate action from the heroes and law enforcement. This is a level of evil that should only exist in fiction, one Tokyo resident commented. Others gave similar comments, as well as pleas for heroes to step up and bring these monsters to justice. While authorities remain tight-lipped, all we can do is watch, wait, and hope for justice. Editorial note. We at the Hero's Insight will continue to investigate and report on the Shai Hasaiki's activities. If you have information or tips, please contact us through secure channels. The conference room had buzzed with a tense sense of urgency. It was in a building belonging to the Heroes Commission. The air charged with collective focus of some of the nation's strongest heroes. Yuki Arakawa, hero named Genesis, stood near the back, her arms crossed over her chest, Gang Orca's commanding presence resonating beside her. She had seen the hero article that went public in the early hours of the morning, even subscribed to the newsletter. Her stomach was twisting in knots. Her eyes roved over the faces around the table, ignoring the ones stood further away in the large room. Ryukyu, her classmates Nijire Hato and Mirio Togata were also here. Kamui Woods, MB Lady, Centipeder, and presiding over the gathering was the sharp-edged tactician, Sir Night-Eye. Each had brought their expertise, but Yuki couldn't shake the weight pressing her chest. Her heart felt heavy with a gnawing suspicion that had been growing like weeds since she first read the article exposing the Shai Hisaiki. She felt sick reading the descriptions of Overhaul's experimentation. As a hero, even an intern, she was able to see the photos of what he had done. She swallowed hard, not wanting to think too much on the parts about Soryu. Soryu, the name spoke with majesty of an endless azure sky. Or a heavy storm that brings no rain but a spark of thunder. A great change. Yuki remembers reading the article, just the brief mention on what his quirk maybe sent her reeling. Then she found out more about what he may look like, short and having normal human-like features and of African descent due to his hair. Nothing on his face since it was covered by a mask. She felt like her mother should know, her mother was going through it now. Is it really you, Kobe? She wanted to say no, but it wasn't a question for her to answer. She felt sick to her stomach. He, little brother, a villain, working with the worst of the worst. A kidnapper, maybe even a murderer. Yuki could only think of their childhood, before everything had turned bad. Kobe was a vibrant child, too full of emotion to contain it all. When he was happy, it was as if the whole house radiated with laughter. Their father, a towering man with a dark complexion, was lazy but kind. He had a penchant for card games and often indulged in Kobe's antics. She remembered it, she could see it all clearly. Kobe, no older than 5, standing in the middle of their living room, arms outstretched and some poorly folded paper cranes fluttered through the air like a miniature flock. Look, Yuki. He was so happy to call her out. She remembers the wide grin that felt as though it was big enough to crack the world. Smiles that glowed but couldn't hold in the dark. Their dad had left, that was what Yuki told him. Truth was their mother kicked him out for his growing gambling addiction. He had gambled their savings away and the household had become quiet. Kobe loved their mother, but he always had more of an affinity for their father. It was only natural. Yuki remembers their dad including him in everything and showing up for him in a way that other dads couldn't or just didn't. So weeks after their dad leaving, when Kobe opened the door to police announcing his death to their mother, she had seen his face curl into untold grief. Grief so clear that she couldn't even envision the same glowing smile he had once had. He stopped smiling. No, that's not true. He still smiled, but there was something dangerous about it. It was more volatile. Every emotion he had spilled out like a hurricane. When he was sad, it was unbearable to be near him. When he was angry, he was someone unrecognizable. She closed her eyes, memories of the time he was in elementary school flashing through her mind like a broken reel of film. She remembers a crying Midoriya running to find her and gushing at the lip, barely explaining himself properly. Kobe had attacked Bakugo. Bakugo was already making a name for himself as the strongest in the school. Kobe was easier to tick off after their father had died, and Bakugo must have said something ignorant Yuki had never asked. She ran as fast as she could, to the boys' bathroom to see Bakugo unconscious and hung with a rope of paper that was wrapped around his neck. Blood was dripping from his head and she remembers Kobe sounding feral. She doesn't remember much of what happened next, she could only see red. She knows she got Bakugo down, but after that she remembers continuously hitting flesh beneath her. By the time it was over, Bakugo had been hospitalized for a week. The principal had called it an incident bordering a homicide. Authorities visited again and their mother cried when she had agreed and signed the papers for Kobe to be sent to a behavioral facility. Yuki only watched, her heart ached, but her face was a mask of cold detachment as Kobe was dragged away with tears flowing out his eyes. Genesis. Gang Orca's voice cut through the reverie, snapping her back to the present. He rarely used her real name in these settings, even though she said she would prefer it. You've been quiet. I'm always quiet. She straightened as she realized more eyes were on her. Her fingers twitched at her sides as she stood behind Gang Orca. She was about to speak. This is it. This is right. Her duty. I believe Soryu is my younger brother. The sentence stuttered out of her. She felt like she was about to burst in uncontrollable shakes on the spot. A ripple of murmurs cut through mainly from the sidekicks behind her. She got a look of Mirio and Nijire's shocked faces. There was a look of concern. One she didn't need. Sir Night Eye silenced everyone. Explain. Yuki took a deep breath. When Kobe had been taken to the behavior facility, he was only 9. He hadn't spent a lot of time developing his quirk or anything, but they both knew enough. Soryu's quirk matches my brother's. It hasn't been named, but from the short descriptions I am sure it is his. There aren't many with similar quirks out there. I can fill in the blanks of what he can do to the best of my knowledge. She stayed quiet for a moment, letting everyone factor in her resolve. About 2 months ago now, he had left home without a trace. My mom reported it only a day later. Yuki didn't realize the little shake that was in her tone. Nijire, who was sat beside Ryukyu, looked at Yuki with wide eyes. Then what if he's being made to do these things because of overhaul? Yuki had seen Centipeder in her periphery shake weirdly. It was hard to tell what was going on with him. What Nijire said could have some truth to it. There's always the possibility. But Kobe is capable of some really terrible things, as he's shown in the past. There was a look of Night Eye showing that he wanted her to carry on. She sighed. He got in an altercation in elementary school and had to be sent to a correctional facility for some years, so he only got back quite recently. A little over a year ago, to be precise. She didn't need to explain the whole situation again. It was most likely in police records. There wouldn't be any time to go over them today, though. There were more mumblings, questions being asked one after another that Yuki couldn't even keep up. Sir Night Eye raised his hand and silenced them. Regardless. This complicates things. But Genesis, Soryu, even if he is your brother, he has committed some serious crimes that won't be absolved. Yuki nodded, her jaw tightening. I know. That's why I'm here. To make sure this is handled the right way. I won't let my feelings cloud my mission. I will do everything to bring him in. Oh shit. I looked over the article on my phone. It was going viral online, and I even got messages from previous contacts asking me if I'm Overhaul's boogeyman. Oh shit. Everything cut so deep. Some shit here was just outright CRP. I hadn't kidnapped anyone. I freed them. This article was written by a man named Kenta Kubo, a journalist who wasn't described in the best light but had gotten a big break in his career because of this. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, forcing a steady breath into my lungs. No time to wallow. It was still early in the compound. The Shy Heiseki were probably up, and it wouldn't take long before all of them and most of all Overhaul came barreling down my neck. Sure, it hadn't said that the leak was me, but with some of that information, who else could it be? The time limit I gave myself was 7 days, but screw that, today had to be the day. I sat cross-legged on the cold floor and summoned a sheet of paper, big enough to form into larger sizes but good enough to start off small and imperceptible. It hovered in the air, folding itself into a tiny serpent. Intricate creases turned it into a living construct, and as it slithered onto my open palm, I blew and let it latch onto the wall and sneak around the compound as I left my room. Time was everything now. Originally, I had planned to supply the heroes with enough information to close in on Overhaul, and once they mounted their attack I was going to disappear with Eri while Overhaul and the rest of them were busy with the heroes. Now I got to hold them off on my own. The halls were quiet as the snake made its way to the bunker underground labyrinthine corridors. I saw its journey as faint impressions through my quirk's connection to it. Every turn, every shadow it slipped into fed back to me. It adjusted and shifted its path to avoid any detection. When it finally reached Eri's room, I had been confronted by Overhaul and the rest of the family, exposed. But outside his office, the snake slid under the crack under the door. She was curled up in the corner, her wide eyes were full of exhaustion. When the snake appeared, her gaze followed it, wary. It unfolded into a small round figure that resembled a teddy bear and waved at her to ease her fears. It then waddled to the door and jumped up high and pressed on the green button to high for her to reach. The door opened. Kobe, the smooth voice of Chronostasis, called out to me from behind. I lifted my head up and turned to see them all, the Shy Heiseki, surrounding me. Mimic spoke up this time. He was on the shoulder of Rappa. Explain how the heroes and the media got their hands on so much information about us. It was a demand. Behind him though was Overhaul. I could see a vein protruding from his head. He was in rage. But he was outside his office. Good. I tilted my head, a flicker of bemusement crossing my face. You think I'm chatty enough to leak your little secrets? My tone was light, dismissive, masking the sharp calculation in my mind. Maybe you should look at your operational security. Chronostasis sneered. His hand was in his coat, but from the bulge I could see that he had a weapon, katana most likely. You've been out of sight more often than not. That doesn't exactly inspire trust. Overhaul raised a gloved hand. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles around his eyes. Enough. His voice was as cold as steel. I could feel the enmity. I'll ask the questions. Nemoto stepped forward with him, like a good lapdog. His presence stayed quiet. Let me handle this, boss. He said, his quirk already active. Overhaul nodded, granting him permission. Nemoto's gaze locked onto mine, his words cutting through the air. Did you give any information about the Shai Hisaki to any outside party that don't have our best interests? My paper serpent had already reached Ares' door. I could feel its faint presence pressing on the green button to safely open the exit without alerting the exit features. Yes, I said simply, the word dropping like a stone into the room. The air grew heavy as everybody in the room stiffened. Nemoto's quirk didn't allow for deceit, and they all knew that. Rappa stepped forward, his fists clenching. This punk thinks that he can stab us in the back and stand here like nothing happened? His voice boomed, the room practically shaking from his fury as well as his fists hitting together. How dishonorable. Tingai placed a hand on Rappa's free shoulder. Not yet. Let's hear how the boss wants it. Overhaul didn't speak for a moment. His golden eyes were fixed on me with a chilling calm. Then he chuckled softly, a sound devoid of humor. You're really clever. Thinking you can play both sides like that, us and the heroes. But the article wouldn't be written like that if you really were double-crossing us. So, you're not with them either. The others in the room listened intently to their boss. So where did you expect to go after ratting us out? I brought you into my family, and this is how you repay me. You didn't bring me into a family. I replied evenly. You brought me into a machine, and whether it's faulty or brand new, a machine will always run its due course to failure. Overhaul's tone of mirth vanished, and his gaze was a cold and hardening glare. You rat, he said. You're just a tool that thinks is more than what you are. Let me remind you, Kobe, of what happens to tools that break. His hands rose and his eyes blinked, a long moment with his eyes closed. Capture him. Alive. The dim, flickering light of the underground halls barely illuminated her path, but Eri trudged forward, following the little paper teddy waddling ahead of her. It waved at her, a bizarre and comforting gesture amidst her fears. Her small feet echoed faintly in the silence, but her mind roared louder with memories. The cold operating table, the antiseptic, and Overhaul's expressionless face as he leaned over her. He was her nightmare. The first time he disassembled her body, she came back screaming so hard her throat bled. She hadn't known it was possible to feel pain like that, in every part of her being all at once. When he reassembled her, there was no relief, only exhaustion and the knowledge that it would happen again. Aries' small hands trembled as she reached a corner of the wall, steadying herself. She hadn't cried in days, her tears felt used up, but her chest ached and her mind was heavy with the familiar question of, why me? Twice before, she had tried to escape, and twice she had failed. Each failure brought more pain, not just for her but for others. She didn't even know her guard's name, the one who had read her the story of Momotaro and kept her company in the silence. Yet the sight of his paper creation in front of her fills her with hope and a want to trust in that. The paper teddy stopped abruptly in front of her, turning toward her with what seemed like a reassuring nod. She glanced around and realized it had led her to a large, rusted door. She hesitated, reaching out with trembling fingers as the teddy jumped and pressed the button to open it. The door creaked as sunlight spilled into the darkness. For the first time in forever, she felt the touch of fresh air on her skin. And then, in a rush of wind, the teddy dissolved into scraps, and before a gasp could escape her lips, a hand grabbed her. The classroom of Class 1A buzzed with chatter. Their homeroom teacher hadn't walked in yet, leaving them all to discuss current matters. Overhaul was the latest topic. Mina Ishido, Hantashiro, and Eijiro Kirishima had all huddled around the desk of one angry Katsuki Bakugo. Maybe it's a mutant quirk, Kaminari speculated, like Tokoyami, but paper? Mutant? Shiro replied with a questioning tone. Paper doesn't mutate. Paper. Bakugo hadn't read the article that his desk mates were talking about. He was zoning in and out of their conversation until they had brought that up. A bad memory popped into his mind. DMN paper mache head. There weren't many, or actually he didn't think there were any heroes with paper quirks. Even if he nabbed Deku's books, he was sure the only paper-related quirk he would find belonged to their former childhood classmate. Looking up, he sees the curly green-haired boy run out of class. Well, I gotta run too. There was more he wanted to find out, so he pushed his chair out and quickly walked out of class, ignoring the four-eyed class president. Behind him he could hear Kirishima to Shiro. What's with those two? Half an hour before, Overhaul paced his office. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, but it did little to soften the growing storm within him. The article's revelations burned his mind. And once reading it, he only thought of one thing. He wanted to crush Kobe into 1,000 pieces, over and over and over again. The reason he was so sure it was Kobe who leaked the information was because some of it, like the pictures of his merged corpses, only Kobe would have known of them. Those specific ones anyway, and he doubts Mimic or Hojo would ever. He made sure to only show them to Kobe, the new guy. He would be fine with that leaking because then he would know who the traitor is and kill him the second he got his eyes on him. But his operations too. His drag routes, no wonder why all his dealers had been getting caught up by the police. His trigger, it was only time before law enforcement start putting in more of an effort to lock down the whole trade. No more delirium for me. But there was no news about the quirk erasing bullets. He wondered why, but he was glad. When Overhaul had put on a new mask and was about to walk out of his office to scatter Kobe with the wind, a dark, swirly and misty portal appeared. Kurogyri. And then a voice. Bring him to me. It was All for One. Just FNG great. All for One's voice spoke in a clear demand that Overhaul knew he shouldn't refute. The boy's potential aligns with my goals. Yeah, right, Overhaul knew that. That didn't really matter. Kobe had an interesting enough quirk. That's what the SCRTM-faced fucker really wanted. Although he would never say that to his face. Overhaul didn't deny All for One of his request. In fact, he didn't even have the time to. As soon as he gave his orders, the warp gate disappeared. Overhaul hated that. He hated how he was just at that man's whims because he may have been a little stronger. He doesn't actually know, he had never fought him, but he hated it. But he couldn't deny All for One's influence. Not yet. He slammed his fist through his desk, and a tremor ran through the room. We're hunting. The convoy roared down the narrow roads leading to the Shai Hisaiki compound. Lemillion sat in the back of one of the lead cars, his jaws tight and his fists clenched on his lap. His mind churned with conflicting thoughts. The article about Overhaul had been a shocker. The information didn't make Overhaul look like just a standard criminal, he looked like a monster. But at the center of Lemillion's mind was Soryu, a figure that had eluded him and still managed to leave his mark with every step. Genesis's his classmate's younger brother. Mirio couldn't shake the image of Yuki's face from his mind during the meeting earlier. The weight she carried when she admitted Soryu was her brother stuck with him deeply. Yuki had never spoke about her brother. It was found out once before their second year had started that she was in a happier mood about him coming home again for some reason. Now they all knew that he was in a correctional facility, like a juvenile hall then? But to know that her younger sibling could get caught up in such darkness was probably unthinkable for her. As they neared the compound, he glanced out the window, catching a glimpse of his own reflection. There was a shadow in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Fighting was something he excelled at, but since Glasslock had been injured, the sharp edges of battle felt heavier. Her wound was just a reminder of how deadly hero work can be. But the image of Soryu kept popping back into his mind. He clearly has the skills, so why wouldn't he just leave? There must be something keeping him there, Mirio thought. Maybe overhaul someone in the Shy Hisaki and he knew him from the correctional facility and wanted to help him get out? Or maybe overhaul has a subordinate using a weird quirk on him to make him stay around him. So what, or who is making Soryu stay? He doesn't know now, but hero work is about saving everyone, Lemillion muttered. Even the ones that may not deserve it. The room was a whirlwind of motion. The walls were trembling under the weight of confrontation. Of battle as I fought to keep my head above water. Every second was a lifetime, and every move had to count. Rappa came at me first, fists moving like a cannon fire, each strike splitting the air with an audible roar. His quirk wasn't subtle, but it didn't need to be. Brute force could be unrelenting and effective. I slid out of his range, forming a curved shield in the same motion. His punch met my shield and the impact sent a shockwave through the room and the shield held. Come on, Soryu. Rappa roared, his grin wide and unhinged. Throw an actual hit. I thought we were just warming up. I shot back, my tone light. A flick of my wrist transformed the shield into a spear, its pointed edge gleaming as I drove it towards him. He twisted, narrowly avoiding it, and countered with another flurry of punches forcing me to leap back. Chronostasis was next, his movements measured. A dart whizzed past my ear, embedding itself in the wall behind me. Another followed, faster this time, and I abruptly managed to duck as it sliced through the air where my neck had been. I retaliated with a wave of paper knives that flew in his direction. Sharp and lethal, forcing him to run behind a pillar. The ground beneath me had shifted suddenly, jagged spikes erupting from the floor, most likely Mimic since Overhaul was still a short distance away with his gloves on. Mimic's voice echoed around the room. You're not slipping away this time, you rat. He'd merged with the environment. His presence was felt in every vibration of the walls and floors. I leaped, wings of paper unfurling from my back and carrying me upwards just enough to avoid the spikes but not high enough to touch the ceiling. The spikes missed me by a few inches, crumbling into dust as Mimic reshaped the terrain. My wings folded into blades and I dived, slicing through the stone floor below and forcing Mimic to disengage. He reappeared in his diminutive form, darting toward me in a snarl. Not bad, I said as the small frame collided with a wall. But for your height you should be more of a silent attacker. I didn't know his real height, or at least I didn't know if that cloth-like dwarf form was his real height. Nemoto circled around the chaos, his sharp eyes never leaving me. He hadn't used his quirk. I was thinking he would to throw me off guard. He still probably is thinking that. Hojo joined the fray, crystalline shards forming in his hands as he hurled them at me with precision. I countered with a barrier of paper, the shards shattered harmlessly against it. With a flick of my hand, the barrier transformed into a scorpion's tail, lashing out and forcing Hojo to dive for cover. Overhaul had arrived with a slow gait. He stood staring at me, he was concerned. His hands were clasped in front of him. The tension in his posture was only a sign of his growing frustration. You're full of surprises, Soryu, he finally said. His voice was calm but still hinted his growing hate for me. But I can't help but wonder. What was your plan? Why join us in the first place? I didn't answer, not immediately. Not until Nemoto asked. Why did you stay within Overhaul's organization? And the answer that slipped out of my mouth even shocked me. To save her, I said before I could stop myself. Honestly, I thought that the answer would be to find out if his organization was connected to the Eden Project. But no, with that answer Eri, the girl with hair of purity and eyes of ruby jewels, she was the answer that came to mind first. Overhaul's eyes narrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before it was replaced by cold fury. Her. He repeated and his voice was low and dangerous. I didn't wait for him to piece it together. The moment his expression shifted, I moved. Wings of paper unfurled once more, and I launched myself toward a shattered window. The Shy Hisaki launched toward me with Overhaul stomping over them to try and grab a hold of me. The wind rushed past me as I soared out of reach. Below I saw her. Eri, just stepping out of the exit, her eyes wide as the paper teddy dissolved in front of her. Relief surged through me, I dipped low, scooping her up with one arm as her tiny hands clung to my shirt. "Hold on," I whispered, and in a final burst of energy, I ascended to the sky. Behind us the compound erupted in chaos. Overhaul's guttural roar of "Airy" tore through the air. His voice was raw and primal, it made Airy clutch me tighter. But his voice was drowned out by the thunderous crash of walls crumbling as the heroes stormed the compound. Sirens were loud as they parked by the compound. Countless Yakuza thugs were put in the forefront of a fight they had no idea was going on. I soared even higher. My eyes swept the horizon, but my attention snapped forward when movement caught my eye. A streak of blue energy and a flash of animated brilliance that I was so used to started closing in on me fast. One was from Ryukyu's agency, Nijire Heido, another third year at UA. I sure am getting lucky with them. And the other was my big sister. Nijire's spiraling energy streams propelled her through the sky with graceful precision, while my sister, Yuki, had animated her shoes into winged constructs, their silver forms gleaming as they carried her effortlessly alongside her classmate. The sight was surreal, and I'd be lying to say I wasn't a little starstruck. "Stop!" Yuki's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, cutting through the rush of wind around me. I faltered, glancing back, and our eyes locked. Her expression was a mixture of determination, anger, and something else harder to define. My heart tightened. "Yuki," I whispered, the name barely audible over the roar of the winds. The whirring of police sirens filled the air, as did the thunderous sound of tearing through the compound walls. Fortunately, a sidekick with X-ray vision had gave her the clear to do so, since there was no one in the area she was tearing down. This gave Nijire as well as everyone else the chance to quickly go in and tear this organization down. Nijire Heido hovered over the chaos, her spiraling energy spinning like ribbons as they propelled her gracefully through the sky. From her vantage point, she was quick to see the smoke and debris billow into the air. Overhaul's compound was already turning to rubble under the heroes' combined force. Nijire glanced to the side, catching Yuki Arakawa. Genesis was rigid, her posture as cold and disciplined as the personality that Nijire got to know. But Nijire could see tension radiating from her form. The roar of Overhaul's voice calling for someone, "Airy," cut through the air. It was a sound that made even Nijire flinch. The desperation and anger in his voice made her skin crawl. Nijire's gaze followed the commotion, and her eyes widened as she spotted a figure shooting into the sky. It was unmistakable, the swirling wing of paper, the distinct silhouette was carrying a child in his arms. "Soryu," she muttered, her voice was barely audible over the wind. That was the villain that Genesis had identified as her younger brother. Nijire had looked to Yuki and saw her tense. Her cold facade cracked just for a moment, as she locked on to the figure flying in the air. Nijire didn't need to be a mind reader to tell what she was thinking, that was her family. The shoes Yuki wore were laced with wing-like attachments. Without a word they came to life. Nijire had always admired her quirk. The way she can bring things to life was captivating. Wings sprouted from the side of her silver boots, unfolding like a metal phoenix, and Genesis launched herself into the air. "Genesis, wait!" Nijire called out, but Genesis didn't hesitate to zoom past her. She surged forward, the intensity in her movements matching the storm brewing within her. Nijire propelled herself after her classmate, spirals of energy crackling around her like lightning. The wind tore at her hair, and her mind raced. She thought of the Soryu that they had been briefed on, just another careless enforcer of Overhaul's will. But seeing him now, carrying a child so carefully, it didn't add up. As they closed the gap, Nijire focused on the child in Soryu's arms. She was tiny, her white hair catching the sunlight as it streamed behind her. Nijire's heart clenched. Who was she? Why was Soryu carrying her? The child clung to Soryu tightly, her face buried in his shoulder. Nijire noticed the way he held her, not like a kidnapper fleeing the scene, but like someone trying to shield her from pain. "Genesis!" Nijire called out. Genesis seemed to be paying mild attention without letting her eyes leave Soryu. "I think that your brother is saving that girl." The air felt heavier than it should have been at this altitude. My wings of paper flexed against the breeze, Eri was clinging to me like it was the only lifeline she had left. Below us chaos reigned, the compound was being crushed, the biggest figures I could see were Empty Lady and Ryukyu. But my focus was on someone else. Someone in front of me. Yuki. She hovered there, just a few feet away. Her animated silver wings on her feet kept her on a level playing field. Her violet eyes burned with the same fire they always had, they were just sharper now, colder. She was Genesis. That's what they called her now, good hero name. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind filled the silence, carrying with it the distant echoes of battle. But I wasn't here anymore. Not really, her face had yanked me back to a memory that blurred into my mind. I was in 5th grade, the boys' bathroom. I was standing below Katsuki Bakugu as he was held in the air by white sheet-like rope. His face pale, his lips gasping for air. The paper rope twisted around his neck, tightening with each pulse of a psychotic anger that was in me. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead where I'd slammed him against the sink. I didn't hear the door open, but I felt her hands on me, strong and unrelenting. Yuki, who had already progressed into middle school, was there for some reason I don't recall. She ripped me away with force that left my shoulder aching for days. I barely had enough time to process what was happening before a fist collided with my face. Then again. And again. I heard a thud of most likely Bakugu falling on the floor of the stall he was in. My sister didn't stop. Her fists rained down on me in a storm of anger and disgust. I tasted my own blood for the first time then. My vision blurred. It was like she wanted to erase something in me, or maybe just me. That's what I felt at the time. It wasn't until a teacher pulled her off of me that it ended. Even then, her voice echoed in my ears, "You're sick, Kobe. You're bad, you're terrible." I don't know why, but hearing her in a tone I had never heard before, spitting out what felt like hate to me. It didn't sit right with me. She wasn't like that before. I remember asking her something about what she had said, thinking that since she seemed calmer now she would take it back. I wanted her to take it back. But 'cause it still wasn't sitting right with me. Nobody good would have to ask that. No matter what bad people do, bad people stay bad. I think I stared up at her taller frame with nausea. It was like I was seeing two sets of her pointing a finger at me telling me I'm wrong. I was wrong, but it was a lapse in judgment. A mistake. I could come back from it, I could do better. But I wasn't given the chance. The next thing I remember is my mom's tears as she gave me away to authorities. I think I was crying that day. Years later, Yuki's eyes hadn't changed. That same cold detachment, the same judgment. And I wanted to say I hate her for it. "You've hit a new low, Kobe," her voice cut like thin ice, "working for a man like Overhaul? Do you even understand what you've done? What he's done?" There she was, ready to act as the judge, jury, and executioner. Eri shifted in my arms, clutching to my jumper. I took a steadying breath, my voice deliberately light as I replied. "Yeah. I've also read the headlines. Sounds like he's not so nice a guy." I then pointed down. "He's down there somewhere, you should probably go searching." Her jaw clenched, the veneer of calm beginning to crack. Human experimentation. Dealing drags. Kidnapping. Murder. The list goes on. This isn't a game, Kobe. They call me Soryu. Now, and have you ever thought that I just don't care? I said, shrugging my shoulders. She flinched, but her expression hardened almost immediately. "You don't mean that. You can't mean that." "Why not?" I shot back, letting a faint smile tug at my lips. "After all, I'm already a villain in your story, aren't I? The bad guys can't change, am I wrong?" Her eyes flickered, the tiniest sign of doubt creeping in, but she didn't bite. "This isn't about you. This is about what you're doing now. The kid in your arms, she's just another one of Overhaul's pawns. You think you're saving her? You're not." "Maybe you're right," I said dismissively, though the words did leave an odd sting that I won't admit. "But I'm not handing her over to you. She doesn't need to be a part of your weird hero fantasy." The blue-haired girl, I almost forgot she was here. But she spoke up. "Kobe, if you care about her, why are you running? If you're doing the right thing, prove it. Let us help." A sharp and perverse voice invaded my head only to shout. "You don't need help. I don't need help. A bitter laugh escaped my mouth. I'm wasting time here. Then tell us, Yuki demanded, her voice rising with frustration. Stop hiding behind your arrogance and say something real. My heart felt like it skipped a beat. There was anger, shame, regret, hate, distrust, rage, fear, annoyance, anxious, aggressive, resentment, and shock. All of it twisted and shook inside me. I let out an uncharacteristic giggle and held on to Eri tighter without meaning to. I felt like soaring to the highest point of the sky and crashing down with a big nuke to satiate those growing emotions. Yuki's expression hardened, her wings shifted as if she was preparing for a charge. But before she could move, a sound shattered the tension between us. A guttural roar, raw and furious, seemingly so close to us. Give her back. Overhaul staggered amidst the rubble of his home. Dust choked the air. He gave a minor thanks for the fact that he had left his father, the ex-boss, back in Kyushu. Empty Lady's catastrophic entrance reverberated through his bones. The screams of his subordinates mixed with the crackle of flame and the sharp, metallic screeches of collapsing steel. His mind was ablaze with a single thought: betrayal. Kobe. The name sent a wave of rage crashing through him. That ungrateful worm, his facade of usefulness had shattered. Overhaul's jaw clenched as his gloved hand trembled. He'd known from the time he met him that he was an enigma. He had operated outside of the family's typical rhythm. But to take Eri, to steal her from under his watchful eye, was a transgression too far. Screw what All for One wants. He can have his rotting corpse and turn it into one of his Nomu when Overhaul is done with him, because he does not plan on allowing him to leave alive. His breath came in short bursts as he glared upward, catching a fleeting glimpse of them. Tiny silhouettes disappearing into the sky. Overhaul stood brushing the debris off his coat with deliberate precision. The minor thugs he had brought with him stood on the front lines, surprising, but he was glad. The noise and dirt was unbearable, like a cacophony meant to mock his failures. He turned sharply, catching a glimpse of Rikiya Katsukame hoisting a large piece of rubble over his shoulder. Rikiya! Overhaul barked. Come here. Rikiya approached, his hulking frame casting a shadow over the debris-strewn ground. His massive hands streaked with blood and dust. Boss, the heroes. Without warning, Overhaul reached out his free hand, finding purchase on Rikiya's chest. The man tensed as Overhaul's quirks surged through him, and in a grotesque instant, their forms had began to merge. Bones cracked, flesh formed, and Rikiya's mass became a part of Overhaul. His heightened frame, muscular and pulsating with stolen energy, now he was coursing with newfound power. The sensation was intoxicating. Strength. He could feel the pull of Rikiya's quirk enhancing him, and he was still in full control. His battered form felt rejuvenated. His veins throbbed with renewed vigor as the chaos around him blurred into a singular focus: retrieve Eri. But Rikiya's power wasn't enough. Tengai! Overhaul's voice thundered. The barrier quirk user stumbled forward, his usually calm demeanor rattled. The smoke cleared and some of the heroes got a clear look at him. Boss. Just like Rikiya, Tengai didn't even get the chance to react. Overhaul's hand gripped his subordinate. The merging was faster this time, more precise. Overhaul assimilated Tengai's ability in his already growing grotesque form. The shift was visible. An armored shell now layered his body, the faint glow of Hekiji's barrier shimmering his elongated arms and legs. The energy coursing through him felt great. He flexed his overgrown limbs experimentally, then leaped. The barriers propelled him upward with a force that shattered the ground beneath him, sending waves of debris outward like a bomb had detonated. Heroes scattered below. Lady shielded herself with her arms as the shockwave rippled through her stance. Ryukyu, in her dragon form, roared and snapped toward him with a ferocious intent, but Overhaul darted past her with blinding speed, his enhanced strength and barriers cutting through the air. Above, the wind whipped through his grotesque form as he locked onto the fleeting figures, Kobe and Eri. His voice erupted into the pale blue skies, animalistic and seething with hatred. Give her back. Sir Night-Eye was apart from the chaos of the raid. He had already pieced together that Centipeder was the one to leak the news of Overhaul and mainly, Soryu. Night Eye had planned to reprimand him after the raid. But now, his mind had dulled. He leaned against the side of a police van, one hand gripping the edge of the door for support. His head bowed, and his eyes, usually alight with focus, were clouded with something dark. His voice was quiet, barely audible. As a tremor escaped his lips. This future? It's too grim. The future was set in stone. That was his belief. His quirk hadn't been wrong yet. But what he had just seen, it was enough for him to do a double take on that just so he could carry on with the rest of his day. The future was set in stone. But he needs to find a way to change it. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Sir, Overhaul has leapt for Soryu. What's our next step? It was Mirio. Lemillion. Night Eye straightened, adjusting his glasses, masking the turmoil with his usual stern demeanor. His mind latched on to one certainty. Soryu, he will be a variable in the future chaos. Capturing him is non-negotiable. Secure Soryu, he said firmly, though his heart clenched. Whatever the cost, we cannot allow him to escape. The flush of blue in the sky turned gray from the dust of the compound even though I was further out. As soon as I spotted Overhaul jumping through the sky with barriers, I turned and soared higher and further with Eri attached to me. A second guttural roar shattered the air behind me, seething with hatred. I turned and my breath hitched. Overhaul was no longer the same well-built individual I had first met in the underground fighting ring. His form was grotesque, a twisted amalgamation of muscle, armor, and grotesque appendages that pulsated with life. It took a second for me to process. He's merged. What he had done to animals and insubordination, he had now done to himself and his own loyal bullets. Who would have thought? The barriers were from Tengai, and those appendages and huge strength boost was most probably from Rikia. I kind of wondered if they had let him do that to them willingly. Seeing how loyal some of them were, like Mimic, I wouldn't be surprised. I cursed under my breath, adjusting Eri in my arms. There was no way I could outrun him, he would keep chasing. Maybe it was pride fueling him. So I couldn't outrun him, or outfly him, not like this. My wings unfurled, paper shifting and folding into massive shapes that caught the wind as I picked up more speed in the air. Stop! This voice wasn't Overhaul's, it was Yuki's, sharp and commanding. I didn't look back, but I felt her presence looming. Those wings of hers give her some tremendous speed. I surely wasn't expecting her to be able to keep up. Nijire wasn't far behind either, her spirals lit up the sky like fireworks. Above, Ryukyu's dragon form tore through the air, with Mirio perched on her back like a missile ready to be launched. It was a desperate chase now. Eri, hold on. She didn't respond, but her face buried against my chest. Overhaul surged upward with terrifying speeds and force, his barrier-enforced limbs slamming into the ground and propelling him towards us like a cannonball. I swerved hard, twisting midair as a massive hand swiped where I had been a second earlier. The shockwave rattled my bones, but I couldn't stop. Even with my breath picking up as I felt my energy depleting. Kobe! Yuki's voice again, this time sounding a little concerned. I ignored her again. I couldn't stop. Ryukyu roared as she dove toward Overhaul, her claws aimed to intercept. He twisted midair, barriers shimmering into existence just as her strike connected. The impact sent out a thunderous boom, the ground splitting beneath them as they collided. Keep them occupied. Mirio shouted as he launched himself from Ryukyu's back. He phased through Overhaul's barrier, his fist colliding with the villain's exposed chest. Overhaul grunted, but his retaliation was instant, a massive arm sweeping upward to swat Mirio away. Nijire's spiral struck next, crashing into Overhaul's side and sending shards of debris flying. Genesis joined the fray. She had a spear on her back which she broke into two weapons, animating them and hurled them at Overhaul. But the man was relentless, his barriers absorbing most of the impact. I used the chaos to gain altitude, my mind racing. Overhaul wasn't just fast, he was smart, even in this monstrous state. Every strike was calculated and aimed to kill. But Overhaul's intelligence wasn't just his strikes, it was his timing. As Mirio phased through the battlefield again, aiming for another crushing blow, Overhaul's barriers shifted. His arms lashed out with surgical precision, connecting with Mirio just as he got out of the ground after phasing. The blow landed directly on his torso. A sickening crush echoed across the battlefield. Mirio! Nijire's voice broke through the brief silence as Mirio hit the ground hard, unconscious and bleeding. Overhaul took to the skies again. He was even quicker this time. His figure was a blur as he closed in on me. But he didn't stop there. He went for someone also closing in on me, Yuki. Overhaul's massive arm collided with her, sending her spiraling downward. Her animated wings flailed and flickered as she plummeted towards the ground. I dove without hesitation. With Overhaul dropping the heroes like flies, he was free rein on me. So I needed to find a way to sort him out now, otherwise I'm in danger. Paper formed into a streamlined net as I caught Yuki, pulling her to a slow descent. "Can you move?" The words came out taut with annoyance. I didn't even mean it. Yuki gave a weak nod and even weaker breaths. "Eri," I said, my tone was softer again like I intended. I shifted her towards my sister. "Stay with her while I take care of the rest, okay?" She hesitated for a moment before nodding. Her tiny hands then clutched Yuki's arms. I rose again with a new focus on Overhaul. With a sharp breath, I propelled myself into the fray. My wings folded into a massive crescent blade, paper edges honed to a molecular sharpness, slicing through the air. Overhaul's barriers shimmered, shifting to block my assault, but I didn't stop. I pushed harder, twisting mid-flight to create a vortex of serrated edges that ground against his defenses like a saw. The barrier cracked, but Overhaul swiped. With a grotesque limb, a bone-bladed arm shooting towards me, I split apart. Literally. It was hard to do and daunting. But I turned to my 2D shape and split in half, letting the strike miss me by a hair before reforming. I shot behind him in a burst of speed, forming an array of tendrils that shot towards his back. Each tendril sought to constrict, to crush, to cut. Overhaul countered, barriers sprouting out of his form like jagged blossoms to intercept my attack. Persistent. I muttered. A large sheet of paper unfurled from my hand, folding into an intricate spinning orb, a drill-like construct. I launched it with precision, aiming for his right arm. The drill met his barrier with a resounding crack, piercing through and striking flesh. Overhaul roared, twisting to retaliate, but the momentary opening was all the dragon hero needed. The dragon surged forward, her jaw clamping around his other arm. She twisted it violently, tearing him off balance. I took advantage of his stumble, shaping a piece of paper into a network of weighted chains that lashed around his legs, binding him to the ground. His barriers flickered, struggling to keep up with the onslaught. Nijire attacked from above, her spirals now a relentless torrent of energy that rained down on Overhaul. His grotesque form shuddered, his barriers barely holding. But his counterattack was brutal. Bone spikes erupted from his back, shooting outward in every direction. One grazed Ryukyu's flank, drawing blood. What the hell is that? That wasn't his quirk. At least to the best of my knowledge. But maybe it is something to do with it. I ignored it for now, and from ripped-up paper I intentionally left out, I formed them to be sharp and swift, directing them to his exposed side. They tore through his barriers like needles through cloth, embedding themselves into his flesh. Overhaul bellowed in rage. I evaded his flailed arm as he tried to attack me, as I attacked him again. Every move was built up to push him into an even deeper hole. Ryukyu and Nijire worked in tandem, their attacks coordinated like clockwork. Ryukyu's strength kept Overhaul grounded, while Nijire's energy spirals chipped away at his barriers. I exploited every gap, every distraction. But Overhaul could take a hit. He was relentless. His form pulsed, barriers reforming faster than we could tear them down. He roared, leaping into the air with a force that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. His massive arms swung toward Nijire, the bone strikes glinting with lethal intent. "Nijire! Move!" Ryukyu shouted out. A massive paper wall intercepted the blow. The spikes tore through like butter, but it slowed him down enough for Nijire to veer away. Ryukyu lunged from below, her claws raking across his side, leaving deep gashed. I could hear the propellers of a helicopter. I ignored it. The battlefield trembled as Milady entered the fray, her colossal form casting a shadow over the chaos. She didn't wait for an opening. Her massive fist came down like a meteor, the force shattering the ground and sending Overhaul reeling. Rikia and Tingai split apart from him. With that one hit that sent waves of dust upward and shook the air. They split apart like the pieces of a collapsing puzzle. I landed on the ground, breathing hard but focused. The battlefield was silent, save for the breaths of those still standing. It was over. Overhaul had lost. He was defeated and unconscious, limbs still intact but torn and broken in a way I hadn't envisioned seeing before. We won. The thought barely settled in my mind when the air shifted. It was oppressive and suffocating, the kind of feeling that sank its claws into your very soul. The air turned cold, unnaturally so, and a pressure descended that shook my knees. A dark portal began forming under Overhaul's subordinates, swirling like a malevolent void. The figure's unconscious body slid toward it, swallowed without resistance. No, Ryukyu growled in her human form, staggering toward the figure being swallowed by the dark mist. Her hand reached out and the portal snapped shut before she could grab them. Another portal formed, then another. Each one engulfed another member. Their forms were devoured by the darkness, disappearing as though they were being erased from existence. I took a step back, breathing sharp. This wasn't Overhaul's doing. That's Kurogyri. Oh, from the League of Villains. What? And what is this bloodlust? A malice so tangible it felt like an invisible knife pressing against your throat. It was suffocating, like drowning in pitch-black water while a predator circled, unseen but felt. The last portal appeared beneath Overhaul himself. His limp form fell to it. But before he vanished, the portal paused and a voice resonated from its depths, dark and deep, carrying a weight. It wasn't a voice meant for ears, it was meant for hearts, meant to twist them into knots of fear. You scurry like insects, fighting for scraps of justice. But this is only a testing phase. So, fail and fail again. All of you will crumble beneath the weight of what is to come. The portal seemed to shiver with the resonance of its words. Overhaul's body jerked as if some unseen force yanked him in faster. The portal closed with a deafening silence, leaving behind only the broken landscape and the weight of its promise. For a moment, no one moved. The battlefield, once alive with chaos and fury, now felt like a graveyard. Where did Kobe go? Nijire asked as she looked around. I was back in the skies, flying low, my body cutting through the thick atmosphere of lingering dread. I flew low, scanning the crumbled terrain until I found her, Yuki. She was cradling Eri against her chest, her expression unreadable. The sight tugged at something buried deep in me. I landed softly, my steps slow and deliberate. Yuki looked up, her violet eyes narrowing. You're back, she said, her tone was neutral. She didn't move to attack, but her grip on Eri tightened protectively. I'm taking her, I replied flatly. Yuki rose to her feet, keeping Eri close. After everything? You know she's safe with us. Yeah, I wonder about that, I shot back. Yuki's expression twisted, confused. What do you mean? The fighting has stopped, Overhaul is arrested right. We ran into some complications, you can ask your friends later. I walked forward to grab Eri. She also reached out but Yuki held onto her. I sighed. Kobe, if you run now it doesn't matter what happens later. You'll be labeled a villain. Do you really think you're the better option? I know I'm not the better option. So why was I still trying to take her? I sighed again, the tension in my shoulders easing as I lowered my hand. You're right, I said, surprising even myself. I am not her savior. I just wanted her out of that hellhole and away from Overhaul. Yuki's gaze softened ever so slightly. Then leave her with me and the other heroes, she said in a quieter voice. I'll make sure she's safe. I'll make sure she has a chance to heal. Eri looked at me, her small hand still reaching out. I knelt down to meet her at eye level, brushing a stray strand of white hair from her face. You'll be okay, I said softly. Overhaul will never reach you again. Your nightmare has been defeated. Her lips quivered and there were even tears flowing down her face. but she nodded, slowly. I stood, stepping back as Yuki adjusted her grip on Eri, holding her protectively. "Where will you go?" Yuki asked, her voice steadier though tinged with something resembling concern. "Nowhere you need to follow." I replied, summoning wings of paper. They unfolded with a rustle. "You don't have to run, Kobe." Yuki said, her words carried less force this time. Truthfully, she probably does still care, even if she acts as she doesn't most of the time. She is still my sister, my one and only sister. But I still had my own thing to do. I shook my head at her and gave one last reassuring look to Eri. I launched into the sky, leaving them behind. The wind rushed past me, carrying with it the weight of the day. Eri was saved. That was good. But my fight was not over. I need to keep moving forward. Uncover the truth about the Eden Project. Expose its creators, its victims, and its legacy. And to deliver swift justice to those who turned lives into experiments. The newsroom hummed with an urgent energy as the camera focused on the almond-shade eyes of the anchor, who sat in front of a vivid backdrop of footage from a shattered compound. The bold headline below her read, "Heroic Raid Fails. Shy Hisaki Escape with League of Villains Aid?" The anchor, her name was Reina Takano, her tone was calm but carried an unmistakable gravity. "Good evening." In what could have been a turning point in the fight against organized villainy, last night's raid on the Shy Hisaki compound ended in a devastating failure. Despite the combined efforts of multiple hero agencies, including those led by Sir Night Eye, Gang Orca, Ryukyu, and MT Lady and Kamui Woods. Overhaul, the Yakuza boss at the center of this raid, escaped along with his subordinates through what has been confirmed to be the portal of the warp villain Kurogiri of the League. The screen cut to footage from a helicopter. Thick clouds of dust obscured much of the compound, but flashes of battle were visible. Ryukyu in her dragon form clashing with Overhaul, Nijire's spirals, and the massive figure of MT Lady delivering a devastating strike. And then the swirling black portals that carried them away. It flashed back to the anchor, who was uncharacteristically playing with her chestnut-colored hair that just fell above her shoulders. Her tailored navy suit hugged her figure in a way that radiated professionalism. Her chair swiveled and she spoke again in the same tone she started with. "This raises troubling questions," the anchor continued, "about a possible alliance between the Shy Hisaki and the League of Villains. If such a collaboration exists, it could mark the return to the chaotic villainy seen before All Might's era of peace." The footage changed again, focusing on a new figure, Soryu. His paper constructs were slicing through Overhaul's barriers and even worked on shielding heroes like Nijire in the fight. The movements were too blurry, so there was no good quality shots of his face. "But another figure has captured the public's attention," the anchor said. "Soryu, a rogue individual whose motives are unclear. Footage shows him engaging Overhaul directly, fighting alongside heroes and even shielding them from harm. Yet despite this, he later on fled the scene. What is he? And what does he fight for?" The live panel discussion began with a hero analyst, a government official, and two reporters seated around a sleek table. The moderator addressed the group. "We've seen the footage. Soryu was instrumental in the battle against Overhaul, yet fled the scene and evaded capture. Minister Tanaka, what is your take?" Minister Tanaka's expression was stern. "Soryu is not a hero. Let's not be fooled by actions. Fighting a villain does not absolve you of being one yourself. This individual operates outside of the law, ignoring the protocols and accountability that keeps our society safe. He is a vigilante at best." The hero analyst adjusted his glasses, offering a measured counterpoint. "But, Minister, the footage clearly shows Soryu's saving lives of heroes that were on that field. His actions, while unorthodox, were undeniably effective. If he hadn't intervened, I'm sure we would have lost more. So we should praise it?" Minister Tanaka crossed his arms and his eyebrows creased. "What happens when his recklessness gets someone killed? Or when he decides that heroes are in his way? Vigilantism leads to anarchy, and Soryu is already a dangerous figure that is growing in notoriety. He must be apprehended swiftly before he inspires copycats." The footage replayed, focusing on the deadliness and swiftness of Soryu's attacks. Then it cut to his aerial battle with the villain. One reporter chimed in. These movements are trained. He uses his quirk incredibly well also. That did bring up a question. Was he just an abnormal talent? Was he trained beforehand? And if so, by who? The broadcast transitioned again to a montage of public reactions. A middle-aged man spoke into his microphone, his face tense. If he's not working with the heroes, then who's he working for? Someone with power to take on Overhaul shouldn't be running around unchecked. A younger woman countered this. He fought Overhaul. You don't do that unless you're trying to help. I think he's being misunderstood. Another voice, trembling with emotion, cried out. Overhaul is still free. That's what matters. How did they let him escape? What's the point of heroes if they can't stop monsters like him? The anchor returned, her expression grave. The public remains divided on Soryu, but one thing is clear. The stakes have never been higher. The potential alliance between the Shy Hisaiki and the League of Villains is a threat that must be addressed. Reina Takano rose gracefully from her desk as the broadcast ended, the hum of the newsroom fading into the background. Her heels clicked with precision against the polished floors, each sound crisp and deliberate, like a metronome keeping time in a soundless corridor. Her measured stride exuded the same confidence she displayed on air, yet something was subtly. The sharpness of her gaze had dulled into an eerie vacancy, her lips twitched faintly as though she were resisting a grin. The rhythmic stepping of her heels echoed louder than it should have, each step reverberating as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. The long hallway stretched endlessly ahead, empty and sterile. The buzzing of the lights added an oppressive drone to the silence. Reina's humming started faint, but grew louder with each step. It was a disjointed melody, sweet yet discordant, as though the tune was searching for itself. Her pace slowed. She turned a corner and abruptly stopped, tilting her head, her dark hair casting jagged shadows across her face. The hum turned into soft, girlish giggles. They were high-pitched, staccato bursts, echoing unnaturally in the narrow space. "Did I do good?" she asked, her voice lifting, almost childlike. The question hung in the air, unanswered, until the darkness itself seemed to ripple ahead of her. A portal swirled into existence, a vortex of black mist and silent menace. Its edges shimmered with faint violet energy, distorting the air around it. The cold emanating from it was palpable, an unnatural chill that gnawed at the edges of existence. Kurogiri's voice emerged from the void, smooth and unhurried yet laden with a weight that made the world feel smaller. "Excellently done, Himiko Toga." The perfect mask of Reina Takano began to melt. Her skin, pristine and pale, rippled like liquid wax. It dripped away in jagged streams, exposing the chaotic, twisted grin and wide golden eyes of Himiko Toga beneath. Her laughter was guttural now, raw and unhinged, the sound of someone reveling in their own madness. "Oh, it was so fun," she squealed, spinning in place, her hair flailing wildly. "They all believe me, hanging on every word." She threw her head back and continued giggling. Kurogiri's tone remained steady, unmoved by her theatrics. "Compose yourself. Return now. We have much to discuss, and the plan advances." With a mock bow, Himiko leaned into the portal, her voice turning into a sing-song taunt. "I'm always ready to make a mess." She vanished into the swirling darkness, her final giggles lingering like a haunting melody in an empty hall. The portal snapped shut, and the corridor was silent once more. The flickering light above steadied for a moment before it, too, dimmed, leaving the space cold and still. The conference room in UA's administration building was quiet. Instead, a somber weight filled the space. Around the oval table sat Principal Nizu, All Might, Aizawa, and Recovery Girl and Midnight. To the side, Midoriya and Bakugo were there with a bandaged Yuki Arakawa standing a few feet from them. Nizu's small frame was deceptively relaxed in his chair. His hands were steepled before him, his black eyes sharp as ever, studying each person like an intricate puzzle. The silence hung heavy, like a string waiting to snap. It was Bakugo who finally shattered it. His voice was rough, filled with pent-up frustration. "That bastard Kobe or Soryu. What is going to happen to him? Even though he spoke with venom, he did seem interested in his fate. His hand briefly went to his neck, his scowl grew deeper. Midoriya shifted but kept quiet. His expression was thoughtful. Nobody else spoke. The teachers were waiting for Nizu to speak up first. Yuki sat with her hands on her lap. She sighed. He saved that kid Eri. He fought Overhaul. She hesitated for the briefest moment. That he walked away because that's who he is now. He's walking his own path, I guess. Aizawa, arms crossed, spoke with his usual bluntness. A path that's reckless and dangerous. And what for even? No one answered, no one knew. He's just putting himself at risk. Midnight leaned forward after Aizawa spoke. Her tone was softer but no less pointed. There have been wild cards like him before, but they do a lot more harm than good. Soryu is not a hero, he's just someone with luck on his side. Midoriya finally looked up and spoke. He's not a hero, but he's not a villain either. And I'd like to think that he's just doing what he thinks is right, but in his own way. Bakugu scoffed. So what, you're defending him now, Deku? He's a DMN time bomb, and I know how ironic that sounds. They should just stuff him in a barrel and send him on his way to prison. Midoriya understood why Bakugu was mad. Kobe had really hurt Bakugu when they were younger, almost killed him even. And he left Midoriya with a few not-so-nice words too, but Kobe never seemed like the type to be a villain in Midoriya's eyes. He wasn't overly as excited about heroes like him or Bakugu, but he never shown any villainous traits until the time before he was kicked out of elementary school. He just seemed completely indifferent to both sides. He didn't care. But he still fought Overhaul and saved that girl, so I don't think he's just some heartless monster. He fought Overhaul cause the maniac was trying to kill him. Of course he'd fight. Bakugu retorted. Yuki cleared her throat. She pulled out a phone from her pocket. Before he left, Kobe slipped this to me along with some more details in a letter. It's information he pulled from Overhaul's systems, emails, financial logs. Some of it mentions a doctor and something titled Project Oversight. It's some experiment that involved a middle school. Nizu's ears perked up at the mention of a project. His paw was tapping against the table. Yuki continued, her voice tightening. There was also those two high schoolers Overhaul's men almost kidnapped. They were previously students of Aldera Junior High. So I expect that to be the school under some type of experimentation. Both Midoriya and Bakugu looked more concerned, their eyes widened. That's the school you two attended. Midoriya stuttered out a response. Yeah, but I didn't graduate there since me and my mom moved to Tokyo. I left 2 years before graduation. And life had only gotten better for him. All eyes were now on Bakugu. I graduated, but it was just the run-of-the-mill middle school. I heard it got shut down though. Yuki cut in to corroborate. Yes, a few months ago there was supposedly a villain that went crazy and attacked students from the school. It was probably on the news and probably briefed over. The logs don't explain the full scope of the project, but Kobe was digging into this. That should be enough proof he was always working against Overhaul. A heavy silence settled over the room as the implications sank in. Nizu broke it. If Soryu's goal was to uncover some truth about Overhaul that the media hasn't seen, then yes, his methods aren't self-serving. However, his form of operations are dangerous and chaotic. That alone makes him a liability. The hero's side faced considerable loss. Sure, no one was dead, but you, he pointed to Yuki, were injured badly and are only able to move around properly because of Recovery Girl. Same with Mirio. That's 2 of my students. Who's to say that if he was never involved it would have got that bad? All Might, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. His deep voice carried a quiet intensity. But who's to say little Eri's suffering would have ended any sooner if he hadn't acted though? All Might had been a little more devastated after seeing the child with cuts and bruises all over her being carried into UA to Recovery Girl's office. He thought on how she had been suffering under the peace he has brought forth in this society. We cannot ignore what he has done. But we also cannot ignore what he has achieved. The line between hero and villain is a thin one. Soryu is walking that line now, and it is not too late to pull him to our side. Midoriya nodded at his idol's words. He was right, he didn't need to fight Kobe, not yet. He wanted to talk to him and find out what it is he is facing, and why he is taking such dangerous methods to reach it. He looked to his senior. Yuki glanced down at her bandaged hands. Her face had gained a considerably calm look. Also, Arakawa. Yuki's head shot up at the sound of Aizawa's voice. You should have handed that phone to the police. I had to get a new phone. And clothes. I had lost all my contacts, but that was fine, I only had 3. 2 I weren't even speaking to, and 1 was just a way for me to make moves in my current position. But it didn't matter anymore. I had already gotten a new phone. One of the latest models of the same brand as my last one. It barely took them 2 years to come out with it. Pointless. I had walked into a store that was branded under the Hero Best Jeanist. He had many stores like these all over the country and even some outside of it. I bought a nice and plain, big black hoodie and a pair of black jeans, not too tight and not too baggy. Thankfully, my face was never caught by the media. Of course, that didn't mean I was in the clear. I was sure that an image of me was given to the heroes in their circle. I took out a few large bills to pay for my purchase. Other than the overall flashiness my quirk gave me, this was one of the major reasons why I loved it. I could use it to create a wad of cash anytime I wanted. This was how I got places to stay, food to eat, and other things like that. Obviously though, things were getting a lot more digitized and some places only accepted card. That was fine too. I already got a bank card made for me that I deposit money in whenever I can. And even if I didn't have my card, I could just materialize a copy with my quirk. I love my quirk. I'm rambling. Anyway, the sheet with overhaul right, a huge failure. And I was sure he would be prowling around trying to find and kill me. Or find Eri first. But she was probably with UA now, and just in time to watch the sports festival that should be happening in a few days if I remembered right. My mind drifted to Eri. I was glad I left her. It wouldn't have been right for me to allow her to latch on to me anyway. She would have slowed me down in every conceivable way. The trauma she's endured isn't something I can fix. In a way, she reminded me of myself. She was a guinea pig for overhaul and I was one for the Eden Project. She's a kid, sure, but not just any kid. Eri is complicated. She doesn't know how to interact with others. She hasn't had a normal life to develop those instincts. And her quirk? It's dangerous. But it isn't just her quirk itself, it's the quirk factor. The quirk factor, or force, is the energy inside every quirk user. It's what fuels their abilities, growing with them over time. Think of it like a muscle. It strengthens and adapts as it's used, but if it grows too fast or isn't aligned with the user's control, it becomes unstable. That's where Eri comes in. Her quirk, Rewind, is beyond extraordinary, but it is also way beyond her ability to control. Her quirk factor is probably astronomically high to the point where it's out of balance with her body and mind. It's why her power could spiral, activate unpredictably. When a quirk factor surpasses the user's capacity, the quirk starts to act on its own. It doesn't wait for commands, it just reacts to bad stimuli. Eri's force is too far ahead of her. Her own quirk is like a runaway train. Mine is quite high, but it grew with me. It's why I let her go. She would have been too much of a liability, a danger to herself, to others, and to me. UA can give her what I can't: structure, stability, and Eraserhead. That man's quirk is good for helping her on her journey to controlling it and her eventually getting better. She'll have people who care for her, maybe make friends, and even a chance to smile without fear for the first time. That was good. I banked to the left. Eri is safe, and I am free to carry on how I need to.